My mother-in-law stood in the foyer of her multi-million-dollar Buckhead mansion, her face twisted in rage as she screamed at me to take my babies and get out. My husband, the man who had vowed to protect me, simply crossed his arms and watched as security guards threw my bags into the freezing Atlanta snow. I was standing there with my 10-day-old twins, my C-section scar still fresh and bleeding. They thought I was just a broke freelance designer with no family and nowhere to go. They had no idea that the very ground they stood on, the cars they drove, and the wealth they flaunted all secretly belonged to me. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to smile through the pain while planning the ultimate revenge against toxic people. My name is Nia Washington, and I am 30 years old. The winter storm that hit Atlanta that night was unprecedented, but it was nothing compared to the absolute ice inside the Sterling family home. I stood near the massive stone fireplace, the flames casting a warm glow across the imported Italian marble floors. I poured myself a heavy crystal glass of bourbon. I did not drink it. I just held it, letting the cold weight of the glass ground me, preventing my fingers from trembling as I stared at the people I used to call my family. The wind was howling outside, a relentless shriek that rattled the massive floor-to-ceiling windows of the estate. But inside, the tension was even more suffocating. Beatrice Sterling, my mother-in-law, paced the floor in her expensive silk robe. She pointed a perfectly manicured finger at my face, her diamond rings catching the firelight. "Do not think designing a few cheap logos gives you the right to step into Atlanta high society," she spat, her voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. "You are nothing but a charity case. We thought we could polish you up, give you the Sterling name, and make you presentable for our circle. But trash will always be trash. You bring that orphanage stench wherever you go." Her words were designed to cut deep, to strike at the very core of my deepest insecurities. Growing up in the foster care system, I had always fought tooth and nail for everything I had. I spent my childhood bouncing from one overcrowded group home to another, never having a real family or a place to call my own. The orphanage stench Beatrice mentioned was her favorite weapon against me. She loved to bring it up at her lavish dinner parties, masking her cruelty behind fake Southern hospitality. She would tell her wealthy friends while sipping champagne that I was so resilient. She would say she was just so blessed to be able to give me a proper home after my tragic upbringing in the system. The other society wives would nod sympathetically while looking at me with thinly veiled disgust. I endured those terrible microaggressions, the constant backhanded compliments, and the outright disrespect because I believed Marcus loved me. I believed we were building a life together away from his mother's toxic influence. I was completely wrong. From the moment we were married, Marcus allowed his mother to dictate every single aspect of our existence. She chose our home, she chose our furniture, and she even tried to choose the names of my children. When I pushed back, when I demanded basic boundaries, Marcus always took her side. He was a master of manipulation, making me feel like I was crazy for wanting privacy in my own marriage. But tonight, the carefully constructed facade had completely shattered. There was no more manipulating, no more pretending. I turned my gaze to look at Marcus. He stood by the grand sweeping staircase wearing his expensive tailored cashmere sweater, his arms tightly crossed over his chest. He completely refused to meet my eyes, turning his head to look at the wall instead. "Marcus," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, despite the searing, agonizing pain radiating from my healing abdomen. "Are you really going to stand there and let her do this to the mother of your children? To Zion and Zuri?" He shifted his weight nervously, looking down at the polished marble floor. "Nia, you have brought this on yourself," he muttered, his voice lacking any trace of the confident businessman he pretended to be. "You never respected my mother. You never understood how things work in our world. You refused to join the right country clubs. You embarrassed us by talking about your past, and you never fit in with the wives of my investors. The business is going through a very tough transition right now, and we need absolute stability. You are just too much of a liability to the Sterling brand. My mother is right. You need to leave tonight." Liability. The word echoed in the cavernous foyer, striking me harder than any physical blow ever could. I looked down at my sleeping twins, holding them closer to my chest. They were swaddled tightly in thick woolen blankets, completely oblivious to the fact that their own father was discarding them out into a winter storm simply to appease his mother's fragile and arrogant ego. I had given birth to them just 10 days ago. My body was still recovering, still bleeding, still aching with every single breath I took. Yet the man who had held my hand in the delivery room was now treating us like disposable garbage. Beatrice let out a sharp, humorless laugh that grated against my ears. "A liability is a generous understatement," she sneered, taking a step closer to me. "You thought you could come into my home and dictate how we run our lives. You thought because you gave birth to these children you suddenly had a permanent seat at the table. This family has a legacy, Nia. We are a pillar of the community. We associate with mayors and senators. We host the biggest and most exclusive charity events in Georgia. We do not associate with women who buy their clothes off the clearance rack and work out of public coffee shops. You thought you hit the jackpot when you married my son, but the free ride is officially over." I watched in silent disbelief as two burly security guards men I had greeted every single morning with a warm smile and a cup of coffee hauled my two suitcases down the stairs. Marcus just turned his back, walking toward the kitchen so he would not have to watch. The guards did not look at me out of shame as they dragged my belongings past the grand piano and shoved them forcefully out the heavy mahogany front doors. The freezing wind whipped immediately into the house, carrying sharp biting snowflakes that melted instantly on the heated floors. The cold air washed over me, a stark reminder of the brutal reality of my situation. Beatrice stepped even closer, her voice dropping to a venomous, threatening whisper. "I want you out of my sight right now. Take your little graphic design portfolio and go back to whatever shelter you crawled out of. And do not even think about asking Marcus for a dime of child support. We have already spoken to our family lawyers. You will not get a single cent of the sterling fortune. I will make sure you are ruined in this city. I will make sure no one ever hires you again. You will be erased from our history." I did not cry. I did not drop to my knees and beg for mercy. I simply stood there absorbing every cruel word, every condescending glance. They thought they held all the power. They thought my silence was submission. They thought kicking me out into the snow would break my spirit entirely. But as I stood there holding my babies, a calm and absolute clarity washed over my mind. The bitter truth was that Beatrice Sterling was living a massive delusion. Her beloved Sterling Tech, the supposed pride of the family, was actually hemorrhaging money and drowning in insurmountable debt. The lavish lifestyle she guarded so fiercely, the luxury cars, the designer clothes, the very mansion we were standing in, was built on a fragile foundation of unpaid loans and maxed-out credit lines. They were desperate for a bailout, begging for a massive influx of cash to keep the lights on and the facade intact. What Beatrice and Marcus did not know, what they could not possibly have comprehended in their arrogant minds, was that I was not just a freelance designer. My small business was a front. I was the silent founder and chief executive officer of Obsidian Holdings, the very venture capital firm that held all their debt. The money they were begging for, the loans, keeping a roof over their heads, were entirely controlled by my signature. I placed my bourbon glass on the mantelpiece, adjusted my grip on my children, and walked out into the storm, knowing exactly how I was going to destroy them. I turned my back on Beatrice and her cruel, echoing laughter, my boots clicking sharply against the imported Italian marble as I headed toward the heavy front doors. The security guards had already dumped my two small suitcases on the icy front porch, eager to follow orders and rid the estate of the unwanted daughter-in-law. But sitting in the corner of the grand foyer waiting to be moved was the custom mahogany double crib I had ordered months ago. I had paid for it entirely with my own money, carefully selecting the rich dark wood and the non-toxic, eco-friendly finishes specifically for Zion and Zuri. It was the only piece of furniture in this massive sterile estate that truly belonged to me, a physical representation of the safe, secure life I wanted to build for my babies. Before I could instruct one of the guards to help me carry the disassembled pieces out into the freezing night, the grand front doors swung wide open. A brutal blast of freezing air swept into the foyer, bringing with it a flurry of blinding white snowflakes and the overwhelming suffocating stench of Chanel perfume. My sister-in-law Chloe stepped over the threshold. She was completely swathed in a floor-length white mink coat, dramatically shaking the snow from her perfectly blown-out hair. Chloe was married to Marcus's older brother, and she had always treated her position within the Sterling family like a royal title bestowed upon her by divine right. Currently 6 months pregnant, she rubbed her prominent belly with one hand and surveyed the scene before her with predatory glee. Her sharp, calculating eyes darted from my suitcases out on the porch to Beatrice's smug face by the fireplace, to my sleeping twins, and finally to the gorgeous mahogany crib resting in the corner of the foyer. A vicious, triumphant smile slowly spread across her face. She sauntered over her expensive designer snow boots, leaving wet, muddy puddles on the pristine marble floor. She ran a manicured hand along the smooth, polished wood of the crib, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the light of the massive crystal chandelier overhead. "Well, well, well," Chloe drawled, her voice suddenly slipping into a highly exaggerated fake African-American vernacular English accent. She always did this when she wanted to mock me, treating my cultural heritage like a cheap costume she could put on and take off for her own personal entertainment. She loved to appropriate the culture while simultaneously looking down on the people who actually lived it. "Girl, you look raggedy." I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I instantly tasted copper. My body was screaming in agonizing pain from the recent surgery, my C-section scar pulling and burning with every slight movement. The freezing draft from the open door was slicing right through my thin winter coat, making me shiver violently. I adjusted the thick woolen blankets around Zion and Zuri, doing everything in my power to shield their tiny, fragile faces from the biting wind. "Step aside, Chloe," I said, my voice dropping low and dangerously calm. "I am leaving." "Oh, you are definitely leaving." She laughed loudly, stepping directly into my path and placing both of her hands firmly on the top rail of the crib. "But this stays right here. This crib is absolutely gorgeous. Custom mahogany, right? I am taking it for my baby nursery." My eyes narrowed, the sheer audacity of her demand momentarily overriding my physical pain. "I paid for that crib myself, Chloe. It belongs to my children." Chloe threw her head back and let out a sharp, mocking cackle. Beatrice immediately joined in from the living room, clearly relishing the spectacle of my humiliation. Marcus remained utterly silent, staring intently at the baseboards, too much of a pathetic coward to defend his own newborn baby's bed from being stolen by his brother's wife. "Paid for it yourself," Chloe sneered, leaning in so close I could smell the expensive red wine on her breath. "With what money, Nia? The pennies you make drawing little logos for local bakeries. Please, every single thing you own, every bite of food you have eaten for the last 3 years was bought and paid for with sterling money. You have been leeching off this family since the day Marcus brought you in from the streets." She turned away from me and aggressively gestured to the security guards, snapping her fingers as if they were dogs. "Take this crib up to the East Wing guest room right now. It is going to be my new nursery." The guards hesitated for a fraction of a second, shifting uncomfortably and glancing over at Marcus for direction. When he said absolutely nothing to stop them continuing to stare blankly at the floor, they bowed their heads in submission and began lifting the heavy mahogany pieces to carry them up the grand sweeping staircase. They were literally stealing my children's bed right in front of me under the direct supervision of my husband. I could have fought her. I could have screamed at the top of my lungs, caused a massive scene, physically blocked the stairs, or demanded they put my property down immediately. The old Nia, the desperate foster kid who had to fight tooth and nail for every hot meal and every scrap of clothing, wanted to drop my bags and tear that expensive mink coat right off her arrogant shoulders. But the silent, calculating CEO of Obsidian Holdings knew much better. That crib was just a piece of wood. The financial debt I held over their miserable heads was worth $50 million. I let them take it. I let them carry it away, knowing it would be the very last thing they would ever take from me. Consider it payment for everything we have done for you, Chloe continued, entirely emboldened by my silence, misinterpreting my strategic restraint for weakness. She patted her pregnant belly again, looking me up and down with absolute, unfiltered disgust. You should be on your knees thanking us for giving you a taste of the good life at all. Now be a good girl, take your little bastards and run along back to whatever ghetto you came from. Call an Uber. Make sure you get the share option so it is cheap enough for you to actually afford it. The sheer, staggering magnitude of her delusion hung heavy in the freezing air. She was standing in a mansion that was heavily mortgaged to the brink of foreclosure, wearing a coat likely bought on a maxed-out credit card, and telling the secret billionaire who owned their entire livelihood to take a budget rideshare in a blizzard. The irony was so overwhelmingly potent, it almost made me laugh out loud. I looked away from Chloe's smug, punchable face. She was just a noisy parasite, a loud and obnoxious symptom of the real disease that plagued this family. My gaze bypassed Beatrice, who was sipping her bourbon with an expression of pure, unadulterated victory. Instead, I locked my eyes entirely on Marcus. He finally looked up, meeting my cold stare. For a brief, fleeting split second, I saw a genuine flicker of panic register in his eyes. He expected me to cry. He expected me to drop to my knees and beg him to change his mind, to plead with him for the sake of our 10-day-old defenseless babies. He expected the desperate, loving, obedient wife he thought he had successfully broken and molded into submission. I did not shed a single tear. I held my children tightly against my chest, feeling the steady, reassuring, rhythmic beat of their tiny hearts against mine. They were my entire future, and I was about to secure that future by completely and systematically dismantling his. You will regret tonight, Marcus, I said. I did not shout. I did not raise my voice or let my tone waver. I delivered the words with the cold, absolute certainty of a judge handing down a final execution sentence. The quiet, deadly intensity of my voice made the massive foyer fall completely dead silent. Even Chloe stopped her arrogant smirking, taking a slight step backward as the temperature in the room seemed to drop another 10 degrees. Marcus opened his mouth, perhaps to offer one last pathetic, hollow justification for his cowardice, but I did not give him the chance to speak. I turned my back on the Sterling family for the very last time, clutching my babies to my chest, and stepped out into the violent, raging winter storm. The heavy mahogany doors slammed shut behind me with a loud, resounding thud echoing into the freezing night. The biting wind whipped across my face, instantly freezing the stray tears I refused to shed inside. I pulled my thin winter coat tighter around Zion and Zuri, ensuring not a single snowflake could touch their delicate skin. The sprawling driveway of the Sterling estate was a long, winding path of cobblestone, now completely buried under a thick layer of rapid accumulation. I walked down those icy front steps, my boots crunching heavily in the fresh snow, leaving the toxic fortress behind me forever. I knew Beatrice and Chloe were likely watching from the second-floor windows, smirking into their expensive wine glasses, fully expecting to see a battered economy car pull up to drag the trash away. Let them look. Let them enjoy their final moments of absolute arrogance. My phone vibrated violently in my coat pocket. I did not need to order a ride. I had sent a single encrypted text message exactly 4 minutes before Beatrice began her unhinged screaming match in the foyer. The storm was worsening, visibility dropping to near zero, but cutting through the blinding whiteout were the piercing LED headlights of 3 identical jet-black bulletproof Cadillac Escalades. The massive vehicles glided silently up the private road, moving in perfect synchronized formation. They did not stop at the guest parking area, where the hired help was supposed to wait. They pulled straight up to the grand entrance, completely dominating the circular driveway. The doors of the lead Escalade swung open before the vehicle even came to a complete halt. Julian, my chief of staff and personal assistant, stepped out into the blizzard. He wore a razor-sharp custom charcoal suit, completely unbothered by the freezing temperature. In his hand was a massive black umbrella, which he instantly deployed, shielding me and my newborn babies from the harsh elements. "Good evening, Miss Washington," Julian said, his voice smooth, highly professional, and completely devoid of the pity I had endured for the last 3 years. Your transportation is ready. He opened the heavy, armored door of the middle SUV. Warm air rushed out to greet me, smelling of rich leather and the faint hint of eucalyptus. I climbed into the spacious interior, settling my babies safely into the heated custom-installed bassinets that Julian had secured hours in advance. As the heavy door sealed shut behind me, shutting out the howling wind and the suffocating memory of the Sterling family, the cabin became a sanctuary of absolute perfect silence. Julian took the seat opposite me, opening a sleek digital tablet. The soft glow of the screen illuminated his highly focused features. "The transfer is complete, Miss Washington," he stated, tapping a few keys with practiced efficiency. "As of 3 minutes ago, Obsidian Holdings has officially initiated the immediate recall on all outstanding high-risk loans connected to Sterling Tech and the Sterling Family Trust." "Give me the exact numbers, Julian." I commanded, my voice completely losing the meek, submissive tone I had utilized for Marcus, and dropping into the firm, authoritative register of a chief executive officer. "Per your direct orders, we have frozen their primary operating accounts," Julian reported, looking directly into my eyes. The massive bridge loan they desperately secured last month to cover their corporate payroll deficit is now legally in default due to the breach of conduct clauses you embedded in the fine print. Furthermore, the mortgage on the Buckhead estate you just exited has been flagged for immediate review. They are currently overleveraged by $72 million. By tomorrow morning, when the banks open, Beatrice Sterling will not be able to buy a cup of coffee using her elite black card. They are entirely financially paralyzed. I leaned back against the plush leather headrest, letting out a long, slow exhale. For 3 agonizing years, I had played the part of the naive, struggling graphic designer. I had allowed Marcus to pay for my coffee dates and Beatrice to mock my bargain bin clothing. I let them believe I was an impoverished orphan who hit the lottery by marrying into their prestigious bloodline. I did it because my firm, Obsidian Holdings, specialized in identifying bloated, corrupt legacy companies and dismantling them for parts. Sterling Tech had been on my radar long before I ever met Marcus at that charity gala. Marrying him was never supposed to happen. Falling in love was my only genuine mistake. For the past 2 years, Marcus would come home and complain bitterly about the ruthless, aggressive lenders who were buying up his company debt through anonymous proxy firms. He would mansplain corporate finance to me at the dinner table, completely unaware that the woman serving him his food was the exact ruthless predator holding the noose tightly around his neck. I had actually wanted to save his family company, to help him turn it around from the inside out of a misplaced sense of loyalty and love for my husband. But tonight, he proved that saving them was a worthless endeavor. Tonight, he watched his own 10-day-old children get thrown into a blizzard. They did not deserve mercy. They needed to be destroyed. "What about the nursery furniture at the townhouse?" I asked, brushing a soft curl from Zion's sleeping forehead. "Already delivered and fully assembled," Julian confirmed without missing a single beat. "The identical mahogany crib you ordered as a cheap decoy was left in the Sterling foyer exactly as you requested. The genuine custom pieces are waiting for the twins at home, along with the night nurse and the premier pediatric specialist you retained." The Cadillac convoy smoothly navigated the treacherous, icy roads, leaving the affluent Buckhead neighborhood far behind. I stared out the heavily tinted windows, watching the blurred streetlights streak past. I thought about Chloe gleefully ordering security to drag my decoy crib up to her nursery. She would soon realize that the beautiful wood she was so proud of stealing would officially belong to the bank by the end of the week. Every single asset they possessed was collateral, and I held the exclusive master key to their complete devastation. My phone rang, breaking the quiet hum of the vehicle engine. It was an incoming call from a highly encrypted private line. I swiped to answer, placing the call on the vehicle's secure audio system. "Boss." The voice of my lead financial investigator resonated clearly through the speakers. "I apologize for the late hour, but the final asset freeze has been successfully executed across all international accounts. Obsidian Holdings now officially owns 94% of Sterling Tech debt. We have effectively locked Marcus and Beatrice out of their own corporate infrastructure. Excellent work, David, I replied, keeping my tone perfectly measured and cold. Prepare the official foreclosure notices for the estate. I want them hand-delivered by our top legal team first thing Monday morning. I want the couriers to intentionally interrupt Beatrice's weekly high society country club brunch. Make sure the timing is highly visible and incredibly humiliating. Understood, Miss Washington. It will be a very public serving. The convoy merged onto the highway heading toward the city towering skyline. My real life was waiting for me in the sky. Not a suffocating traditional mansion filled with bitter old money and suffocating prejudice, but a sprawling, ultra-modern penthouse that crowned the tallest residential tower in Atlanta. A fortress of glass and steel that I had purchased entirely in cash 2 years before I even met my soon-to-be ex-husband. As the heavy armored vehicles pulled into the private subterranean parking garage of my building, a team of dedicated personal staff was already waiting in a neat line. Security personnel immediately flanked the vehicle, creating a secure perimeter, while Julian gently helped me extract Zion and Zuri from their travel bassinets. We bypassed the main lobby entirely, utilizing the dedicated private elevator that shot upward at breathtaking speed directly to the top floor of the skyscraper. The elevator doors chimed and slid open gracefully. I stepped out of the confined space and into the breathtaking expanse of my actual home. The camera in my mind seemed to circle me, executing a slow, steady, continuous orbit as I walked past the imported modern art and the floor-to-ceiling glass walls that offered a commanding panoramic view of the entire city. The glittering lights of Atlanta spread out beneath my feet, a kingdom I had quietly conquered while the Sterling family was too busy laughing at my shoes. I gently handed my sleeping twins over to the waiting night nurse, who offered a warm, respectful smile before carrying them safely toward their newly designed state-of-the-art nursery suite. My arms felt suddenly empty, but my spirit felt significantly lighter than it had in 3 long years. I walked slowly into the center of the massive sunken living room. As I lowered myself onto the expansive low-profile Italian leather sofa, the smart home system recognized my presence immediately. The ambient lighting instantly blazed to life, illuminating the massive space with a warm, brilliant glow. The shadows of the past 3 years were physically and metaphorically banished from the room. I was no longer Nia the charity case. I was no longer the grateful orphan desperate for a family to accept her. I was Nia Washington, the absolute apex predator of the corporate financial world. Julian stood silently at the edge of the room, holding his tablet, awaiting his final instructions for the evening. "Julian," I said, resting my elbows on my knees and steepling my fingers together. "First thing tomorrow morning, I want you to initiate a hostile takeover of Sterling Tech. No negotiations, no backdoor deals, and absolutely no extensions. I want the board of directors notified that Obsidian Holdings is forcing an immediate restructuring. Fire the existing executive team starting directly with Marcus. Consider it done?" Julian nodded, jotting the notes rapidly on his screen. "And Julian?" I added, a sharp, genuine smile, finally breaking through the cold exterior I had maintained all night. "Make sure Chloe's platinum credit cards are the very first ones to decline tomorrow. I want her to be standing at an upscale checkout counter buying expensive baby clothes when she realizes she is absolutely completely broke." The camera angle visually shifts to a severe tilting Dutch angle, perfectly capturing the frantic, unhinged, and totally off-balance energy consuming the Sterling estate the following morning. The grand, opulent living room that once felt like an intimidating fortress to me now looked distorted, chaotic, and entirely pathetic. Beatrice positioned herself carefully on her antique velvet chaise lounge, adjusting the brightness on her smartphone to cast a soft, sympathetic glow over her face. She hit the record button to broadcast a live video directly to the highly exclusive Sterling Family and Friends Network, a digital space populated entirely by Atlanta's elite socialites, wealthy investors, and influential country club members. Beatrice wore a pristine silk morning robe, her hair deliberately mussed to convey a night of agonizing worry. She clutched a vintage lace handkerchief, dabbing at her perfectly dry eyes with masterfully practiced theatrical precision. I never wanted to air our private family matters on a public forum. Beatrice choked out, her voice trembling with expertly manufactured grief. She looked directly into the camera lens, playing the role of the devastated, deeply concerned matriarch to absolute perfection. But my daughter-in-law, Nia, has suffered a severe catastrophic mental break. The postpartum depression hit her violently and without warning. Last night, in a fit of absolute delusion and hysteria, she grabbed my precious, defenseless newborn grandchildren and ran out into a freezing blizzard. She completely lost touch with reality and essentially kidnapped the Sterling heirs. We are absolutely terrified for the baby's safety. She is unstable, entirely unpredictable, and severely unwell. She paused, allowing a dramatic, shuddering breath to escape her lips, ensuring her wealthy audience absorbed every single drop of her venomous lie. We tried to stop her, Beatrice continued, placing a hand over her heart. Marcus begged her to stay to seek professional psychiatric help, but she was completely irrational. If anyone sees her, please contact us immediately. She has no money, no resources, and no family of her own. We just want to bring Zion and Zuri home, where they belong, safe and sound, in the nursery we built for them. Just off camera, Marcus paced back and forth across the expensive Persian rug. He looked exhausted, but a deeply smug, arrogant smirk played at the corners of his mouth. As Beatrice ended the live broadcast, watching the comments of sympathy and outrage pour in from their gullible social circle, Marcus pulled his phone from his pocket. "That was a brilliant touch, Mother," Marcus said, dialing a number on his keypad. "Let everyone think she is a crazy, unfit mother. It will make the custody battle an absolute breeze when she inevitably comes crawling back. But just to speed up the process, I am going to play my final trump card." Beatrice took a delicate sip of her morning mimosa, her fake tears vanishing instantly. "What are you doing, darling?" "I am calling the bank," Marcus replied, his chest puffing out with pathetic masculine pride. "I am officially reporting her card as stolen and freezing the joint credit account. Without that card, she has absolutely zero access to funds. She cannot book a hotel room, she cannot buy diapers, she cannot even afford a hot meal. The freezing temperature outside will break her spirit by noon. Let us see how long her little rebellious independence lasts when she is starving and freezing on the streets with two screaming infants." He pressed the phone to his ear, navigating the automated banking menu with aggressive, entitled taps. He genuinely believed he was the master of his domain, completely cutting off the financial lifeblood of his supposedly impoverished, dependent wife. He thought he was initiating a masterstroke of financial abuse, locking the metaphorical cage door and throwing away the key. They had absolutely no idea that the joint account he was so proudly freezing was nothing more than my digital pocket change. Miles away, high above the treacherous ice and snow blanketing the city, the morning sun poured through the massive floor-to-ceiling glass walls of my ultra-modern penthouse. The climate-controlled air was perfectly calibrated, smelling faintly of expensive jasmine and fresh espresso. I sat comfortably at the massive quartz kitchen island, wearing a plush cashmere lounge set, calmly sipping an artisan roast, while reviewing a series of complex financial portfolios on a sleek digital monitor. Down the hall, the soft, soothing melody of a classical lullaby played in the state-of-the-art nursery suite, where Zion and Zuri were sleeping peacefully under the watchful, highly trained eye of a premier pediatric night nurse. Julian stepped into the kitchen, his charcoal suit immaculately pressed, holding an encrypted silver tablet. His expression remained highly professional, but a faint glimmer of profound amusement danced in his dark eyes. "Good morning, Miss Washington," Julian said, placing the tablet on the quartz counter directly in front of me. "I thought you might want to see the opening moves the Sterling family has chosen to make this morning. It appears your former mother-in-law is attempting to control the public narrative." I tapped the screen, playing the downloaded recording of Beatrice's theatrical social media broadcast. I watched her dab at her dry eyes and weave her vicious, calculating lies about my mental stability. I listened to her label me a delusional kidnapper, using my vulnerable status as a new mother to paint a picture of an unhinged, dangerous woman. A cold, razor-sharp smile curved my lips. It was exactly the kind of predictable, manipulative garbage I expected from Beatrice. She was playing checkers while I was actively redesigning the entire chessboard. She is quite the actress, I noted, taking a calm sip of my coffee. Make sure our legal team archives this video immediately. When we file the defamation and libel lawsuits alongside the corporate takeover documents, this broadcast will serve as excellent, irrefutable evidence of her malicious intent to destroy my character. Already archived and securely filed with the litigation department, Julian confirmed smoothly. However, there is a secondary development. 5 minutes ago, our banking monitors flagged an aggressive action on your decoy joint account. Marcus Sterling personally contacted the issuing bank. He reported the platinum card as stolen and requested a total immediate freeze on the account. I set my coffee mug down, a genuine delighted laugh escaping my chest. The sheer, unfathomable stupidity of the man I had married was truly a marvel to witness. Marcus genuinely believed that joint credit card was my only lifeline to the civilized world. During our entire marriage, he operated under the arrogant assumption that his measly corporate salary was funding our lifestyle. He proudly monitored that specific joint account, acting like a benevolent king rationing out an allowance to a peasant. What the arrogant fool completely failed to realize was that I was the one quietly and systematically funding that account. To maintain my cover as a struggling freelance graphic designer, I regularly authorized micro-transfers from one of Obsidian Holdings' untraceable shell corporations directly into that specific bank account. I practically paid my own allowance just to inflate his fragile ego. The card he had just aggressively frozen had a spending limit of perhaps $15,000. To Marcus, $15,000 was a weapon he could use to enforce my starvation and submission. To me, $15,000 was a rounding error on the daily interest generated by my secondary investment portfolios. He actually thinks he is starving me out, I said, shaking my head in absolute disbelief. He thinks freezing my pocket change is going to send me crawling back through the snow begging for his forgiveness. A highly fascinating psychological display of unearned confidence. Julian agreed, retrieving the tablet. Shall I initiate the counter protocol now, Miss Washington? Or would you prefer to let them enjoy their false sense of superiority for a few more hours? I stood up from the quartz island, walking over to the expansive glass wall that overlooked the sprawling, snow-covered metropolis. The city of Atlanta looked peaceful from this incredible height. But beneath the surface, a massive financial earthquake was currently brewing, and my finger was hovering directly over the detonation button. Let them believe they have won the morning, I commanded, my voice dropping back into the cold, lethal cadence of a corporate apex predator. Let Marcus strut around that heavily mortgaged mansion, boasting to his mother about how he has effectively cut off my resources. Let them celebrate my supposed demise. I turned back to Julian, my eyes locking onto his with absolute unwavering intensity. Then exactly at noon, I want you to drop the hammer. Execute the total asset freeze on the Sterling family accounts. I want every single corporate and personal banking line connected to that family immediately suspended. And Julian, ensure you actively monitor Chloe's retail activity. You have my direct authorization to personally decline her transaction the second she attempts to swipe her card. The camera slowly dollied out from the glowing retina display of my customized laptop, pulling back to reveal the sleek, dark expanse of my penthouse office. The expansive room was bathed in the harsh, unfiltered morning light reflecting off the Atlanta skyline, but I remained seated deep within the shadows, watching the digital theater unfold on my screen. The high-definition Zoom interface was completely dominated by a single active speaker window. Marcus Sterling sat behind his massive mahogany desk at Sterling Tech headquarters, attempting to project the absolute authority of an untouchable tech billionaire. His bespoke Italian suit was perfectly pressed, his hair immaculately styled, and the background of his office was intentionally curated to display various industry awards and photographs of his seemingly perfect aristocratic family. But the high-resolution lens captured every single microscopic detail of his mounting terror. I could see the fine, slick sheen of nervous perspiration gathering at his temples. I watched his eyes dart frantically off camera, undoubtedly looking toward Beatrice, who was likely standing just outside the frame aggressively pantomiming instructions. He kept pulling at his tailored collar, shifting his weight in his expensive leather chair, as if the seat itself had suddenly caught fire. On the digital grid, my own video feed was entirely disabled. I presented nothing to him but a pitch-black square bearing the stark, intimidating white text, Obsidian Holdings, CEO. Beside my black square was the live feed of Julian, my chief of operations, sitting in a sterile, brilliantly lit boardroom proxy. Julian wore his signature charcoal suit, his face an impenetrable mask of absolute corporate indifference. He was the visible executioner for this meeting, but I held the absolute power of life and death over the sterling legacy from the comfort of my own home. Marcus cleared his throat, leaning forward to press his hands flat against his desk in a manufactured display of confidence. He flashed his trademark charismatic smile, the exact same smile he used to charm investors, manipulate women, and completely deceive me for 3 agonizing years. "Gentlemen," Marcus began, his voice taking on the polished, practiced cadence of a seasoned salesman. "And to the esteemed CEO of Obsidian Holdings, I want to personally thank you for taking the time to review our third quarter prospectus today. As you can clearly see from the data packets we forwarded this morning, Sterling Tech is currently standing on the precipice of a massive, unprecedented market breakthrough. Our proprietary cloud integration algorithms are outperforming every single competitor in our sector. We are not just participating in the tech industry, we are actively redefining the boundaries of digital storage." I took a slow, deliberate sip of my artisan coffee, my eyes tracking the completely fabricated bar graphs and artificially inflated revenue charts Marcus was currently sharing on his screen. The absolute audacity of the man was staggering. He was presenting a company that was literally bleeding capital from every single artery, attempting to dress up a rotting corporate corpse in a tuxedo. "We are currently seeking a secondary bridge loan of $5 million, Marcus continued, his smile tightening slightly as he approached the true purpose of his desperate presentation. "I want to be completely transparent with the board. This capital injection is not a lifeline. It is simply a strategic growth accelerant. We need the liquid capital to rapidly scale our server infrastructure before our fourth quarter launch. With Obsidian Holdings backing this expansion, we project a return on investment that will shatter all previous fiscal records. Sterling Tech is a legacy brand, and we are offering you the exclusive ground floor opportunity to join our next monumental chapter." He finished his pitch with a dramatic, breathless pause, staring eagerly into his webcam, desperately waiting for the invisible billionaires on the other side of the screen to throw money at his feet. Julian did not blink. He looked down at his silver tablet, tapping the screen once before looking back directly into the camera. "Mr. Sterling," Julian said, his voice cutting through the digital feed like a sharp, serrated blade. "Your enthusiasm is noted. However, the Chief Executive Officer has a few specific inquiries regarding the financial packets you just provided. Please direct your attention to page 42 of your own prospectus." Marcus blinked, a sudden flash of panic widening his eyes. He hastily clicked his mouse, scrolling down through his PDF file. The silence stretched out thick and suffocating as he stared at the page. I reached forward and pressed my finger against a small, sleek audio modulator resting on my desk. The device was programmed to take my voice and completely strip away all identifiable human characteristics, pitching it down into a deep, metallic, androgynous tone that sounded exactly like a digital deity delivering a judgment from the cloud. "Mr. Sterling," my modified voice echoed heavily through the Zoom call, causing Marcus to physically jump in his seat. "You claim this $5 million loan is a strategic growth accelerant. Yet looking at your internal ledger, your server infrastructure expenditure has remained entirely stagnant for the past 18 months. Furthermore, we noted a highly irregular diversion of capital exactly 3 weeks ago. $1.2 million was quietly transferred from your corporate payroll account into a private offshore trust registered to a Beatrice Sterling. Care to explain how funding your mother's private luxury account constitutes scaling your server infrastructure?" Marcus turned completely ashen. The charismatic, confident tech CEO vanished instantly, replaced by a terrified, cornered animal. He looked wildly off camera again, his mouth opening and closing as he desperately searched for a plausible lie to cover the glaring, undeniable fraud I had just exposed to the entire Obsidian board. "That was a clerical error," Marcus stammered, his voice cracking noticeably. He reached up and wiped the sweat from his forehead, completely abandoning his professional posture. "A temporary reallocation of funds for a family real estate acquisition that was mistakenly routed through the corporate branch. The funds are actively being restored as we speak. I assure you the $5 million we are requesting today is strictly entirely earmarked for company operations." "A clerical error," my modulated voice repeated, letting the metallic words drip with absolute unfiltered condescension. "Fascinating. Is it also a clerical error that your company has completely defaulted on your employee health insurance premiums for the last 2 consecutive payment cycles? Is it a clerical error that you currently owe your primary software developers 3 months of back pay? Your company is not experiencing unprecedented market growth, Mr. Sterling. Your company is experiencing total systemic organ failure. Listen to me," Marcus pleaded, leaning so close to the camera that his face distorted the lens. The arrogance was completely gone, entirely replaced by raw, naked desperation. "You do not understand the market pressures we are facing. My family has run this company for 3 generations. The Sterling name means something in this city. We just need this $5 million to bridge the gap. Once our new software launches, we will be highly profitable again. I guarantee it. I will personally sign a personal guarantor clause. Put my own private estate up as collateral. Just give us the funding." I watched him beg. I watched the man who had allowed his pregnant wife and newborn twins to be thrown into a freezing winter storm literally grovel for his financial life on a video call. He was willing to bet his precious family estate, the very house I had just walked out of, to save his rotting company. He did not even realize that the mortgage on that estate was already severely underwater. "Your personal guarantees hold absolutely zero weight with this firm, Mr. Sterling," I stated, my modulated voice echoing with absolute lethal finality. "Your internal infrastructure is completely corrupted. Your leadership is incredibly incompetent. Your financial records are entirely fraudulent. Obsidian Holdings officially rejects your request for a $5 million capital injection." Marcus slammed his hands down on his desk, genuine tears of frustration welling in his eyes. "You cannot do this. We have a standing relationship with your proxy investors. If you pull out now, the company goes under. We will have to declare bankruptcy by Friday. You are destroying a legacy." "We are not destroying anything," my voice countered, cold and unyielding. "We are simply observing a demolition you initiated yourself. Furthermore, due to the undeniable evidence of gross financial mismanagement and the unauthorized diversion of corporate funds to private family accounts, Obsidian Holdings has determined that Sterling Tech represents a critical, unacceptable risk." I paused for exactly 2 seconds, letting the absolute terror solidify in Marcus's mind before I delivered the killing blow. "Effective immediately," I commanded. "Obsidian Holdings is activating the accelerated repayment clause on your existing corporate debt. We are officially recalling the $2 million loan you secured last quarter. You have exactly 24 hours to wire the full amount, including all accumulated interest and penalty fees, directly to our primary holding account." Marcus stopped breathing. He stared at the pitch-black square on his monitor, as if he were staring directly into the eyes of a monster. $2 million? Marcus choked out his voice, a pathetic, high-pitched wheeze. "I do not have $2 million. Our accounts are completely drained. You just saw the ledger. You know we do not have the liquidity. If you enforce that recall, you will force us into immediate liquidation. You will take everything." "That is correct," I said, leaning closer to the microphone, allowing a trace of my own satisfaction to bleed into the modulated audio. "If the funds are not received by 9 a.m. tomorrow, our legal department will seize all Sterling Tech physical assets, intellectual property, and real estate holdings to satisfy the outstanding debt. We highly suggest you begin packing your office, Mr. Sterling. The era of your family legacy has officially expired. Wait, please, you have to listen to me. Marcus shouted, panic completely consuming him. He stood up from his chair, grabbing his laptop and shaking it as if he could physically reach through the screen and force me to change my mind. We can renegotiate. I will step down as CEO. I will give you controlling shares. Just give us time. I have a family. I have a wife. I just had children. You cannot put us on the street. He was actually using me and my babies as a shield. He was using the very family he had discarded last night as a pathetic bargaining chip to save his own skin. The sheer disgusting hypocrisy of his plea disgusted me to my absolute core. Your time is up, I said. I reached forward and clicked the red button at the bottom of the screen. The Zoom call instantly terminated, cutting off Marcus's frantic, screaming pleas mid-sentence. The display snapped back to my quiet, serene desktop background. I reached out and closed the laptop, the soft, satisfying click of the aluminum casing ringing out in the quiet luxury of my penthouse office. The first massive domino had officially fallen, and the sky over the Sterling family was finally caving in. The camera slowly tilts, shifting the entire frame into a severe, deliberate Dutch angle. The perfectly symmetrical, ultra-modern lines of my penthouse office are suddenly thrown into a sharp, disorienting slant, a visual manifestation of the absolute unhinged freefall currently swallowing the Sterling family alive. The ambient lighting in the room dims to a soft, moody glow, casting long, dramatic shadows against the imported Italian marble flooring, save for a single warm spotlight, illuminating the plush velvet sofa where I sit. I sink deeper into the lush cushions crossing my legs and slowly swirling a generous pour of vintage Bordeaux in a heavy crystal glass. The rich, dark red liquid clings to the sides of the glass, like blood reflecting the quiet, lethal satisfaction burning brightly in my chest. A slow, venomous smile plays across my lips. The financial slaughter I orchestrated hours ago is now bearing its chaotic, beautiful fruit. My private, highly encrypted cell phone vibrates violently against the sleek surface of the glass coffee table, shattering the pristine silence of the penthouse. The caller ID flashes in bold, aggressive letters, Jamal Sterling, Marcus's older brother, Chloe's incredibly arrogant, relentlessly entitled husband. He is the supposed patriarch in waiting of the Sterling Empire, a man who struts through life believing his last name grants him absolute immunity from consequence. I take a slow, deliberate sip of my wine, letting the complex flavors coat my tongue, savoring the moment before I reach out and tap the green speakerphone button. Jamal's voice instantly explodes through the quiet luxury of my living room, echoing sharply off the floor-to-ceiling glass windows. He is not speaking, he is roaring. His words are loud, sloppy, and thick with a blind, terrifying rage. "What the hell did you do, Nia?" he screams, his voice cracking with the sheer, undeniable force of his panic. "Did you call the police? Did you file some kind of fraudulent identity theft report? My platinum cards are declining all over the city. The corporate accounts are locked out. What kind of sick, vindictive ghetto game are you playing?" The absolute staggering ignorance of his accusations almost makes me pity him. He genuinely believes that I, his discarded, supposedly impoverished sister-in-law, simply called a customer service bank hotline and cried wolf to freeze his massive wealth. He cannot even begin to fathom the colossal institutional scale of the destruction bearing down on him. He operates entirely on pure ego and unearned legacy, completely blind to the ruthless, intricate mechanics of high-level corporate finance. "You listen to me, you pathetic little leech!" Jamal continues to rant, his breath ragged and heavy over the speaker. "I am a Sterling. I have intimate connections with the chief of police. I golf with the regional banking commissioners. I am going to have my lawyers drag you through the mud until you are begging to live in a cardboard box. I will have you thrown in a federal penitentiary for financial fraud. Turn the cards back on right now, or I swear to God I will ruin you." I let him scream. I let him entirely exhaust his vocal cords, listening to the absolute primal terror bleeding through his aggressive bluster. He is a drowning man thrashing violently in the water, completely unaware that I am the ocean itself. I say absolutely nothing. I do not defend myself. I do not hurl insults back to validate his anger. I simply listen to the rapid, panicked rhythm of his breathing. The profound, heavy silence from my end of the line only seems to infuriate and terrify him further. When he pauses to gasp for air, preparing to launch into another pathetic volley of empty threats, I reach out with one perfectly manicured finger and tap the red button. I cut him off mid-sentence, terminating the connection and leaving him screaming blindly into the digital void. Almost immediately, the screen of my phone lights up again. This time it is a rapid-fire barrage of text messages, accompanied by a heavy, relentless stream of notification pings. It is Chloe. Unlike her husband, who is currently experiencing the terrifying real-time collapse of his financial reality, Chloe is still functioning entirely within her own shallow, materialistic, completely fabricated delusion. She is entirely oblivious to the apocalypse. The messages pop up in quick, venomous succession, a desperate attempt to kick me while she assumes I am already down. Just picked up my brand new 2026 Range Rover autobiography. The text is followed by a heavily filtered, high-resolution selfie. Chloe is sitting in the driver's seat of a pristine, blindingly white luxury SUV, aggressively flashing her massive diamond rings at the camera lens. Her lips are puckered in a smug, victorious pout. Another text arrives seconds later. Fully loaded, custom cream leather interior. Marcus is upgrading his sports car next week. It is such an absolute shame you do not know how to keep a high-value man, Nia. Maybe if you put some actual effort into your appearance instead of walking around looking like a miserable charity case, you wouldn't be freezing out in the cold right now. Enjoy your budget Uber pool. Do not forget to rate your driver 5 stars. I stare at the glowing screen, a genuine, delighted laugh bubbling up from deep within my chest and escaping into the quiet room. The sheer intoxicating irony is a delicacy I want to bottle and save forever. The luxury dealership had likely accepted her initial application based purely on the prestige of her last name, but they certainly hadn't processed the final financing through the Sterling corporate accounts yet. Those accounts no longer existed. She is currently sitting inside a heavily customized vehicle that is technically a stolen asset, aggressively bragging about a billionaire lifestyle that is evaporating like mist in the morning sun. I pick up the phone, my thumbs hovering over the digital keyboard. I do not type out a paragraph explaining my immense secret wealth. I do not defend my ability to keep a man, nor do I point out that her so-called high-value husband is currently facing total, irreversible financial ruin. I simply open the emoji keyboard and select a single classic bright yellow smiling face. Just a simple, pleasant, utterly unbothered smile. I hit send, watching the little blue bubble appear on the screen, knowing that my absolute lack of devastation will drive her completely insane. I toss the phone back onto the table. From the shadows of the hallway, Julian approaches. His footsteps are entirely silent against the thick imported Persian rug. He carries a sleek black leather folio under his arm, stepping into the warm pool of light surrounding the sofa. He presents the folio to me with a slight, deeply respectful bow, his face maintaining its signature mask of absolute professional indifference. Inside the leather binder lies the final devastating piece of documentation regarding Jamal Sterling's highly guarded private assets. Jamal, the loud, aggressively confident older brother who loved to lecture everyone at the dinner table on fiscal responsibility, harbored a crippling, catastrophic secret. For the past 4 years, he had been funneling millions of dollars into high-stakes, unregulated, underground gambling syndicates stretching from Macau to Monaco. He was a degenerate addict hiding behind a tailored suit. When his personal liquidity finally dried up 6 months ago, he had desperately leveraged his primary physical asset, the sprawling 10-bedroom, multi-million-dollar Buckhead mansion he shared with Chloe. He had quietly signed over the deed as collateral to an anonymous, incredibly aggressive offshore lending firm to cover his mounting, insurmountable gambling debts. What Jamal absolutely failed to investigate in his blind rush to secure gambling funds was the corporate structure of that specific offshore lending firm. It was a direct, wholly owned subsidiary of Obsidian Holdings. I owned his massive gambling debt. By direct extension, I legally owned the very roof over his head. I pick up my custom platinum fountain pen from the side table. The cool, heavy metal feels incredibly satisfying and powerful in my grip. I slowly review the foreclosure execution order neatly printed on the thick, textured legal paper. The terms are absolute and completely unbreakable. Because Jamal had officially missed his hidden, heavily penalized monthly interest payment yesterday, a direct, unavoidable consequence of the total asset freeze I had initiated across the Sterling board, the property is now officially in default. There is no legally mandated grace period. There is no opportunity for renegotiation or restructuring. I bring the platinum nib to the signature line, pressing down firmly, and sign my name with sharp, sweeping, elegant strokes. The scratch of the pen against the paper sounds like a guillotine dropping. "Julian," I say, handing the closed leather folio back to him. The ink is dry. Jamal Sterling's primary residence is now the official uncontested property of Obsidian Holdings. I want the immediate eviction executed with extreme prejudice. Julian nods, pulling out his encrypted tablet to relay the commands. "Contact the local sheriff's department right now and arrange for a priority civil standby." I continue, my tone cold and clinical. "Dispatch our most intimidating private security contractors to the property immediately. They are to inform Jamal that he has exactly 1 hour to vacate the premises entirely. If he refuses or if he attempts to cause a scene, their personal belongings are to be physically removed and placed directly on the curb in the snow. And Julian," I add, taking another slow, highly satisfying sip of my vintage wine, letting the warmth spread through my chest. "Make absolutely certain that Chloe is home when the security team breaches the front gates. She just sent me a lovely, boastful photo from the luxury car dealership. I want her to drive that stolen, unfunded Range Rover straight back to a massive mansion she no longer legally owns, only to find the heavy iron gates locked, the security codes changed, and all of her expensive designer luggage sitting in the freezing mud. Let us see exactly how much of a high-value man she thinks Jamal really is when they are both sleeping in a budget roadside motel tonight." The camera drops to the floor, executing a smooth, continuous tracking shot that perfectly captures the sharp, rhythmic click of my stilettos against the imported Italian marble. The lens follows my deliberate, unhurried footsteps as I move down the expansive, sunlit corridor of my penthouse, heading directly toward my master dressing suite. The air up here is perfectly climate-controlled, smelling of expensive jasmine and absolute power. Below me, the sprawling city of Atlanta is currently swallowing the Sterling family alive. Marcus is officially cornered. The Obsidian Holdings debt recall I initiated this morning has sent a catastrophic terminal shockwave through his entire corporate infrastructure. His remaining vendors are freezing their shipments, his panicked board members are threatening immediate mutiny, and his legal team is likely hyperventilating into paper bags. Sterling Tech is less than 24 hours away from total irreversible insolvency. He is completely out of options, out of leverage, and entirely out of time. As I cross the threshold into my massive glass-enclosed walk-in closet, the encrypted smartphone resting on the central quartz island begins to chime. The screen illuminates, displaying a name I have not seen flash across my device in what feels like an absolute eternity: Beatrice Sterling. I do not answer immediately. I let it ring. 1, 2, 3, 4. I let the agonizing silence stretch, forcing the supposedly untouchable matriarch to wait in suspense. On the 5th ring, I casually swipe the screen and raise the device to my ear. "Nia, my sweet, beautiful girl." Beatrice's voice oozes through the speaker. The vicious theatrical grief she had weaponized on her social media broadcast yesterday is entirely gone. The venomous, condescending tone she used to belittle me for 3 agonizing years has completely vanished. In its place is a thick, sickeningly sweet, entirely manufactured warmth that actually makes my stomach turn. "How are you holding up, darling? I have been absolutely sick with worry about you and my precious grandchildren." I remain absolutely silent, letting the heavy, uncomfortable, dead air press aggressively against her ears. I refuse to give her a single microscopic inch of validation. Beatrice clears her throat, the fake sweetness faltering for a microsecond before she forces it back into her tone. I know tensions have been running incredibly high lately. Marcus is just so overwhelmed with the immense pressures of his company, and we were all just terribly frightened when you left in the storm. We said things we deeply regret. But our pastor gave a truly beautiful sermon this morning. He reminded us that God teaches us to forgive. Family must always come first, Nia. We must extend grace and compassion to one another, especially in times of severe hardship. Grace? I repeat, my voice a flat, emotionless mirror reflecting her absolute hypocrisy. How profoundly spiritual of you, Beatrice. To what exactly do I owe this sudden, miraculous, divine intervention? She completely ignores the frost in my tone, pressing forward with her desperate, pathetic agenda. We want you to come home, Nia. We are hosting a traditional Sunday dinner tomorrow evening at the estate. Just the immediate family. We want to see the babies, and Marcus desperately wants to make amends. He is ready to offer a full, unconditional apology. We all are. We just want to break bread, pray together, and heal this unfortunate divide. You belong with us. I slowly walk my fingers across a row of impeccably tailored designer suits, my mind racing far ahead of her transparent, laughable trap. I already know exactly what triggered this sudden, desperate religious awakening. My corporate surveillance team had flagged a frantic, clawing series of inquiries from Sterling Tech's remaining legal counsel earlier this afternoon. In their blind, hyperventilating search for any available liquid assets to satisfy the Obsidian Holdings execution order, they had stumbled across an old, heavily buried public property record. 3 years ago, shortly after my wedding and long before I had fully integrated my immense wealth into Obsidian's anonymous shell corporations, I had purchased a vast undeveloped tract of suburban land on the rapidly expanding northern outskirts of Atlanta. I bought it for absolute pennies, using a minor, untraceable trust, fully intending to eventually develop it into a massive, eco-friendly commercial complex. Because my legal name was still technically attached to the original obscure deed, Marcus and his lawyers had finally found it. They had cross-referenced the current municipal zoning maps and realized that the seemingly barren dirt sitting directly in the path of a major newly approved highway expansion was now independently appraised at over $8 million. They genuinely believed they had struck gold. They thought I was completely oblivious to the land's explosive astronomical appreciation and value. They assumed I was just a naive, financially illiterate housewife who had forgotten about a meaningless piece of dirt. This Sunday dinner is not an olive branch. It is a calculated, desperate slaughterhouse. They intend to sit me down, butter me up with fake apologies, cheap religious platitudes, and expensive wine. Then right before dessert, Marcus will slide a complex, heavily disguised legal document across the antique dining table. They want to manipulate the exhausted, supposedly destitute mother of their heirs into signing over that deed as a collateral guarantor for Sterling Tech's corporate debt. They genuinely think they can smile, pray, and swindle me out of an $8 million asset to save their sinking ship. A Sunday dinner. I muse aloud, my hand stopping on a pristine, blood-red Alexander McQueen power suit. The structured fabric feels heavy and lethal, like custom-forged armor. Just the family coming together to heal. Yes, darling. Beatrice breathes, the absolute relief making her voice shake with eager anticipation. We can put all this terrible ugliness completely behind us. You are a sterling Nia. We take care of our own. I will be there, I reply, letting a dark, highly anticipated satisfaction bleed into my voice. Tomorrow evening, tell Marcus to prepare his apology very carefully. I am expecting a masterful performance. I terminate the call immediately, not allowing her the satisfaction of another word. The breathtaking audacity of these people is a true marvel. They are actively burning alive in an inferno of my own creation, yet they still firmly believe they are the ones holding the matches. Julian steps silently into the dressing suite, his dark eyes observing the crimson suit I have pulled from the rack. I take it the sterling matriarch has officially extended her invitation, Miss Washington? She has. I confirm, turning to face him, a cold, razor-sharp smile curving my lips. They want me to attend their traditional Sunday dinner. They are planning a highly coordinated ambush regarding the northern suburban tract. They intend to leverage my supposed emotional vulnerability to force a signature and secure an $8 million lifeline to block our foreclosure. Julian's expression remains completely impassive, a blank wall of professional indifference. A remarkably foolish and highly predictable strategy. Shall I prepare the tactical security detail for your transport to the estate tomorrow evening? No visible security presence. I command, holding the red jacket up to the mirror, admiring the severe commanding cut of the shoulders. I want to arrive looking exactly like the exhausted, hopeful, easily manipulated woman they fully expect to see. I want them to feel absolutely intoxicatingly confident, right up until the exact microsecond I snap the steel trap shut on their necks. However, Julian, I want you to prepare the final irrevocable acquisition documents for Sterling Tech. I turn away from the mirror, locking eyes with my chief of operations. When Marcus inevitably fails to meet our $2 million repayment deadline at 9 a.m. tomorrow, you will instantly initiate the total corporate takeover. I want the transfer of ownership finalized, legally binding, and completely irreversible before I even sit down at their dining table. Consider it done, Miss Washington, Julian says, making a swift, precise note on his encrypted tablet. And regarding Jamal and Chloe, our security contractors have successfully removed them from the Buckhead property. They are currently completely locked out of all banking access, and their vehicles have been secured. Let them wander the freezing streets tonight, I say, my voice dropping back into a smooth, lethal cadence. By tomorrow evening, they will have absolutely no choice but to come crawling back to Beatrice's heavily mortgaged estate, seeking temporary shelter. I want the entire pathetic family gathered under one single roof when I drop the final devastating curtain on their entire legacy. The camera pushes in, executing a tight, unforgiving close-up on my face as my chauffeured vehicle glides silently to a halt in front of the Sterling estate. Through the tinted glass, I stare at the sprawling brick mansion. The imposing columns and manicured hedges look exactly the same as they did when I was first brought here, as a naive, desperate young bride. But my perception of this place has fundamentally altered. My expression remains razor-sharp, carved from absolute ice, as a fleeting montage of memories flickers behind my eyes. I remember the endless, suffocating family dinners where I was treated like an unwanted servant. I remember swallowing my pride, shrinking myself down to fit into their oppressive mold, and enduring their relentless, calculated cruelty just to keep the peace. That woman is dead. She froze to death in the snow the night Marcus kicked her out. The woman stepping out of the car tonight is the architect of their total destruction. I step onto the pristine cobblestone driveway, wearing a tailored jet-black Tom Ford trench coat over a sleek, dark emerald dress. The heavy oak front doors swing open before I even reach the portico. Beatrice stands in the threshold, her face stretched into a painfully wide, desperate smile that barely conceals the frantic, clawing panic beneath her perfectly powdered skin. "Nia, my sweet girl." Beatrice coos, reaching out with both hands to pull me into a suffocating, entirely fabricated embrace. I do not return the gesture, allowing my arms to remain loosely at my sides until she awkwardly pulls away. She completely ignores the freezing rejection, her eyes darting nervously down the driveway, as if expecting an army of lawyers to march up behind me. "Come in out of the cold. We are all just so incredibly thrilled you decided to join us." I step into the grand foyer, the familiar scent of lemon polish and expensive floral arrangements hitting my senses. The air inside the house is thick and heavy, vibrating with a toxic electric anxiety that makes the very walls feel like they are closing in. I follow Beatrice into the expansive, formal living room. The entire Sterling clan is gathered, looking less like a family of aristocrats and more like a collection of cornered rats. Marcus stands near the grand fireplace, clutching a crystal tumbler of scotch so tightly his knuckles are completely white. Jamal is pacing near the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking absolutely decimated. His designer suit is slightly wrinkled, his face is unshaven, and his eyes are bloodshot, with the pure, unadulterated terror of a man who just watched his entire life vanish into the hands of an anonymous corporate entity. He and Chloe had undoubtedly been physically removed from their Buckhead mansion hours ago, forced to retreat to this heavily mortgaged estate in absolute disgrace. Despite her husband looking like a walking corpse, Chloe is perched on the edge of a velvet armchair, entirely committed to her delusion. She is aggressively swirling a glass of white wine, glaring at me with a toxic mixture of profound insecurity and vicious entitlement. Her designer luggage is likely piled haphazardly in one of the guest rooms upstairs, yet she still genuinely believes she is the superior woman in the room. "Look who finally decided to grace us with her presence!" Chloe sneers, her voice slicing through the tense silence of the room. She sets her wineglass down with a loud, aggressive clack against the marble coaster. The sassy black woman is back, bringing her endless, exhausting drama to Sunday dinner. Marcus winces visibly, stepping forward to intervene, but Chloe raises a hand, completely ignoring her husband's frantic, silent pleas to keep her mouth shut. She is projecting her own sudden, terrifying homelessness directly onto me, desperate to assert dominance over the only person she views as a weaker target. "We all know exactly why you are here, Nia." Chloe continues, slipping into a mocking, highly exaggerated caricature of African American vernacular English, a disgusting habit she routinely deployed whenever she wanted to remind me of my supposed lack of class. "You realized it is cold out there in the real world without sterling money keeping you warm. You came crawling back for a handout. So do us all a massive favor, drop the ridiculous strong independent woman routine, sign whatever paperwork Marcus needs you to sign, and he will cut you a child support check. Then we can all move on from this pathetic ghetto mess you created." Jamal stops pacing, turning to his wife with a look of sheer frantic panic. "Chloe, shut your mouth!" He snaps, his voice trembling with the weight of the secrets he is keeping from her. He still has absolutely no idea that I am the one who orchestrated his eviction, but the sheer stress of his financial ruin is causing his fragile facade to crumble. Just let Marcus handle his own wife. I do not look at Jamal. I keep my eyes locked entirely on Chloe. My expression does not change. I do not frown. I do not scowl. I simply offer her a slow, terrifyingly calm smile. It is the exact same smile I sent her through a text message hours ago while she was bragging about a stolen luxury car. I let her absorb the chilling, absolute silence, watching the profound unease slowly begin to creep into the edges of her arrogant sneer. Before Chloe can launch another venomous insult, a deep, commanding voice echoes from the arched doorway leading to the dining room. "That is quite enough from everyone," Arthur Sterling announces, stepping into the living room. Marcus's father is the imposing, ruthless patriarch of the Sterling family, a man who built his entire identity on the systematic exploitation of others. Arthur carries himself with the stiff, unyielding posture of a seasoned corporate predator, though the deep bags under his eyes betray the sleepless nights he has undoubtedly spent watching Sterling Tech's stock plummet toward the abyss. He walks over to a crystal decanter, slowly pouring himself a drink, deliberately drawing out the silence to center all the attention in the room entirely on himself. He turns to face me, taking a slow sip of his bourbon. His eyes are cold, calculating, and dripping with a deeply ingrained, sickeningly arrogant savior complex. "Nia," Arthur begins, his tone rich, resonant, and entirely condescending. "My daughter-in-law is understandably stressed, but her delivery is completely unacceptable. We are not here to hurl insults. We are here to talk about family. We are here to talk about duty, legacy, and the sacred obligations we owe to one another." He takes a slow, deliberate step toward me, using his physical presence in an attempt to intimidate me, a tactic that might have worked on the frightened girl I was 3 years ago. "You must understand our perspective," Arthur continues, his voice lowering into a smooth, manipulative cadence. "When Marcus brought you to this house, we had our severe reservations. You came from absolutely nothing, Nia. You were a product of the foster system, an orphan with zero family, zero background, and zero prospects. You were a ghost in this world. But we did not turn you away. The Sterling family opened its doors to you. We gave you our prestigious name. We clothed you in luxury, we fed you at our table, and we elevated you to a status you could never have possibly achieved on your own." He pauses, letting the heavy, toxic weight of his words settle over the room. Beatrice nods vigorously in the background, dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue, fully buying into her husband's completely fabricated narrative of their own saintly benevolence. The Lord teaches us that to whom much is given, much will be required. Arthur preaches, raising his glass slightly, as if delivering a sermon from an altar. We pulled you out of the gutter, Nia. We saved you. And now, unfortunately, Sterling Tech is facing a temporary, highly manageable liquidity issue. Marcus will explain the specifics at the dinner table, but it requires a minor administrative signature from you to restructure a particular asset. It is a mere formality, but it is also an opportunity. He steps even closer, leaning down slightly so we are entirely eye to eye. His breath smells of expensive alcohol and desperate rotting greed. It is an opportunity for you to finally prove your worth. Arthur states, his voice dropping to a harsh, demanding whisper. It is time to show some basic fundamental gratitude for the incredible life we provided you. It is time to repay the massive debt you owe this family. The sheer staggering magnitude of his delusion is almost beautiful to witness. Arthur Sterling is standing in a house he can no longer afford, demanding gratitude from a woman he routinely allowed his family to abuse, attempting to emotionally blackmail me into signing over an $8 million property to save a company I already completely control. I hold his gaze without blinking. The air in the room grows incredibly dense, the silence stretching out until it becomes physically uncomfortable for everyone except me. I absorb every single drop of his toxic manipulation, feeling the immense crushing weight of his patriarchal arrogance break harmlessly against the impenetrable armor of my own secret power. Gratitude. I finally reply, my voice perfectly smooth, echoing clearly through the massive quiet room. What a fascinating concept, Arthur. I assure you, by the end of this evening, I will give this family exactly what it deserves. Every single thing you have earned. I look past him, my eyes sweeping over Beatrice's fake concern, Marcus's trembling cowardice, Jamal's panicked exhaustion, and Chloe's fading arrogance. Shall we proceed to the dining room? I ask, my tone entirely polite and flawlessly composed. I am absolutely famished, and I believe Marcus has a very specific presentation he is incredibly eager to show me. The camera initiates a slow, continuous orbit shot around the massive candlelit dining table, perfectly capturing the stifling, predatory tension gripping the room. The opulent crystal chandelier casts long, dancing shadows over the Sterling family as they take their respective seats. From this rotating perspective, the contrast is stark and utterly cinematic. On one side of the table sit Arthur, Beatrice, Marcus, Jamal, and Chloe, a united front of desperate cornered aristocrats masquerading as benevolent saviors. On the other side sits me, perfectly isolated, playing the role of the vulnerable, overwhelmed prey they so desperately need me to be. The dining staff serves the first course in absolute silence. No one touches their food. The air is so thick with manufactured toxic anticipation that it feels difficult to breathe. Beatrice forces a rigid, terrifyingly bright smile, her eyes darting across the table to her husband. Arthur gives a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. The trap is officially primed. Beatrice reaches beneath the table and produces a thick, heavy stack of legal documents bound in a premium leather folder. With a loud, deliberate thud, she drops the paperwork directly onto the center of the polished mahogany table. She slides it across the smooth surface until it comes to a halt directly in front of my untouched plate. Now, Nia, darling. Beatrice begins, her voice dripping with an artificial sugary sweetness that makes my skin crawl. As Arthur mentioned in the living room, Marcus is dealing with a very minor temporary administrative hurdle at the company. It is nothing you need to trouble your pretty little head over. We simply need your signature on this standard collateral pledge. It is a mere formality to release some locked funds. Marcus leans forward, resting his elbows on the table, attempting to deploy his absolute best, most reassuring husband routine. It is about that empty plot of land you bought up north a few years ago, Nia. The corporate lawyers realized your name is still technically on the deed. The bank just needs you to sign as a secondary guarantor so we can leverage the asset for a short-term bridge loan. It means absolutely nothing to you, but it will help the family immensely. I looked down at the documents, keeping my face entirely blank. I let my hands tremble just a fraction of an inch, a subtle, masterful piece of physical acting. I do not understand, I say, pitching my voice slightly higher, injecting it with a flawless blend of confusion and manufactured fear. You want me to put up my land? But Marcus, you told me I was financially illiterate. You said I had absolutely no idea how corporate finance worked. What if the company fails? What happens to my property? Chloe lets out a loud, obnoxious, completely unrestrained scoff from across the table. She rolls her eyes so hard I am genuinely surprised she does not strain a muscle. Oh, please spare us the pathetic, helpless victim act, Chloe snaps aggressively, tapping her manicured fingernails against her wine glass. Do you honestly think you have a choice right now? You are sitting in our house, eating our food, carrying the Sterling name. Just sign the damn paper, Nia. Stop being so incredibly difficult, and sign it so Marcus can finally write you a modest child support check, and you can leave. We are all exhausted by this. Jamal kicks his wife sharply under the table, his face draining of all color. He knows their situation is highly precarious, even if he does not know the full terrifying extent of it. Chloe, shut up, he hisses through clenched teeth. Arthur raises a hand, silencing the table with absolute patriarchal authority. He looks at me with pure, unfiltered condescension. Nia, listen to me very carefully, Arthur says, his voice taking on the cold, demanding tone of a dictator. You came to this family with absolutely nothing. You were an orphan. You had no legacy, no safety net, and no future. The Sterling family graciously took you in. We elevated you. We gave you a life of extraordinary privilege. Signing this document is not a request. It is your fundamental duty. It is the absolute bare minimum you can do to repay the immense debt of gratitude you owe us. Do not make us regret the charity we showed you. I look around the table. The slow orbit of the camera would capture the absolute unyielding malice in their eyes. They are entirely unified in their desire to use me, bleed me dry, and discard me the moment my signature hits the page. They genuinely believe they have broken me down, manipulated my emotions, and cornered me into submission. I take a slow, trembling breath. I reach out and pick up the heavy gold pen resting beside the folder. If this is what the family requires, I say softly, keeping my eyes fixed on the thick paper. It is. Marcus urges, his voice completely breathless with raw, desperate greed. Just sign right there at the bottom, Naya, on the dotted line. I uncap the pen. I press the gold nib against the thick parchment. With swift, deliberate flowing strokes, I sign my legal name. The entire atmosphere of the dining room shifts in a single violent microsecond. The stifling tension vanishes, instantly replaced by an overwhelming collective exhale of pure relief. Marcus visibly slumps back in his chair, wiping a sheen of sweat from his forehead. Beatrice claps her hands together in delight, her fake warmth dropping immediately. Arthur takes a massive gulp of his bourbon, a deeply smug, arrogant smirk spreading across his face. They have what they want. The performance is entirely over. Excellent, Beatrice says, her tone instantly turning brisk and dismissive. She reaches across the table and snatches the folder away from me as if I might infect it. Now, Nia, I believe you mentioned you were tired. It has been a very long evening for all of us. I think it is best if you see yourself out. We have private family business to discuss. Of course, I reply, my voice dropping, its trembling, frightened pitch returning to its natural, cold, resonant cadence. I stand up from the table, smoothing the front of my emerald dress. I would hate to intrude on your private family business. Good night, Arthur, Beatrice, Marcus. I turn and walk out of the dining room. I do not look back. My stilettos click sharply against the marble foyer as I make my way to the heavy front doors. The crisp, freezing winter air hits my face as I step out onto the portico. My chauffeured vehicle is waiting exactly where I left it. I slide into the plush, heated leather of the back seat, tapping the privacy partition to signal my driver. As the car glides smoothly down the cobblestone driveway away from the sprawling, doomed estate, I pull my encrypted phone from my coat pocket and send a single one-word text message to Julian. Execute. Back inside the grand dining room, the Sterling family is prematurely celebrating their supposed salvation. Marcus is eagerly flipping through the signed documents, ready to scan them directly to their corporate attorneys. Arthur is pouring a second round of celebratory drinks. Chloe is likely complaining about my attitude. Then every single smartphone in the room simultaneously erupts with a high-pitched urgent notification chime. Marcus frowns, pulling his phone from his suit pocket. He opens the email expecting a confirmation from his legal team. Instead, he finds a certified, heavily encrypted legal declaration sent directly from the Executive Litigation Department of Obsidian Holdings. The camera angle shifts to capture Marcus's face as his eyes scan the dense legal text. His triumphant smile freezes, then slowly, agonizingly contorts into an expression of absolute, unadulterated horror. The color drains completely from his face, leaving him looking like a freshly embalmed corpse. "Marcus," Beatrice asks, noticing his sudden terrifying paralysis. "Darling, what is it? Did the bank clear the funds?" Marcus cannot speak. His vocal cords have completely seized. He drops the phone onto the dining table. Arthur snatches the device, his eyes narrowing as he reads the glaring, irrefutable text radiating from the screen. The email is incredibly concise and entirely lethal. It informs the Sterling family that the document they just forced Nia to sign was not a standard collateral pledge. When their desperate corporate lawyers blindly drafted the paperwork to leverage the suburban land against the Obsidian Holdings debt, they utilized a standard digital template provided by the creditor. Julian had personally modified that specific template. By applying her signature to a defaulted corporate loan document held by Obsidian Holdings, Nia did not pledge her land to save them. As the Supreme Chief Executive Officer of Obsidian Holdings, her signature instantly triggered the contract's hidden ironclad asset disposition right. It is a highly specialized power of attorney clause reserved for catastrophic corporate defaults. The legal reality crashes down on Arthur and Marcus like a physical ton of bricks. The signature they just bullied, manipulated, and fought so desperately to obtain did not secure them a bridge loan. It legally, irrevocably converted the entire Sterling corporate entity and every single physical asset tied to the family name into a direct personal liability owed exclusively to Nia Washington. The final sentence of the email glows with terrifying absolute finality. By executing the asset disposition right, the Sterling estate, Sterling Tech and all associated family holdings are now the direct legal property of Nia Washington. The grace period has been officially revoked. The total repayment of all outstanding debts is required immediately. "She owns us," Arthur whispers, his voice trembling for the first time in his entire miserable life. The crystal glass slips from his fingers, shattering violently against the floor. "The girl, she owns everything." The camera accelerates. It abandons the slow, suffocating orbit of the dining room and transitions into a fast, highly kinetic Steadicam shot, locking tightly onto the sharp, precise movements of my hands. My fingers slide flawlessly into elbow-length black silk gloves. I snap a heavy custom-forged platinum cuff around my wrist. I grasp the handle of an aggressively sleek, sharp-edged clutch containing the final printed physical copies of their absolute destruction. The lens follows my hands as I push open the massive gold-plated double doors of the Atlanta Grand Ballroom. I allowed them exactly 24 hours of borrowed time. I instructed Julian to freeze the physical asset seizure of the estate and the corporate accounts for one single agonizing day. I did this entirely so they could proceed with hosting the annual Sterling Winter Gala. They could not cancel the event without immediately confirming the swirling, toxic rumors of their total bankruptcy to the entirety of Atlanta high society. They were forced to dress up paste on their desperate smiles and walk directly into the blinding spotlight of public scrutiny while knowing they are completely ruined. It is the ultimate excruciating punishment. A public execution disguised as a high society charity ball. The ballroom is an absolute monument to their final pathetic vanity. Towering ice sculptures of rearing stallions are already beginning to melt under the oppressive heat of the massive crystal chandeliers. Thousands of white orchids cascade from the ceiling, masking the sharp, metallic scent of pure desperation radiating from the host family. I move through the sea of tuxedos and designer gowns, a lethal shadow cutting through a room entirely oblivious to the massacre about to unfold. From the main stage, a sharp tap against a microphone echoes through the cavernous room. The Steadicam tilts up, revealing Beatrice Sterling standing behind a podium carved from solid ice. She is wearing a heavily structured, suffocatingly tight gown, absolutely smothered in thousands of hand-stitched Swarovski crystals. The dress acts like a suit of blinding, sparkling armor, designed to distract the wealthy donors in the room from the fact that the woman wearing it is financially destitute. Her smile is so tight and strained it looks like her facial muscles might physically snap. Ladies and gentlemen, Beatrice projects her voice trembling slightly before she forces it into a booming theatrical cadence. For over 4 decades, the Sterling family has stood as a towering pillar of grace duty and unparalleled philanthropy in this beautiful city. We have always believed that those blessed with immense fortune have a sacred, unbreakable obligation to lift up the less fortunate among us. Tonight we gather to raise capital for our most ambitious charitable initiative yet. It is a breathtaking, nauseating performance. The so-called charity initiative is nothing but a hollow, desperate shell fund. They are actively utilizing their historic social prestige to solicit millions in donations from their elite peers, fully intending to quietly funnel that tax-free capital directly into Sterling Tech's bleeding corporate accounts to stall the inevitable. They are begging for their lives under the guise of high society charity. I continue my slow, deliberate approach toward the front of the stage, the Steadicam following the smooth, rhythmic sway of my arms as I glide past the VIP tables. That is when my eyes lock onto Marcus. He is standing near the base of the stage, positioned perfectly in the spotlight for the event photographers. He is projecting an aura of arrogant, untouchable wealth, but his jaw is clenched so tightly it looks painful. He has a champagne flute in one hand, and his other arm is firmly linked with Chloe. Jamal is entirely absent from the photo op, likely hiding in a dark corner of the ballroom, drowning his profound humiliation in scotch after being physically evicted from his home. Marcus, ever the dedicated opportunist, has stepped in to escort his sister-in-law, presenting a unified, impenetrable front of Sterling family resilience. But it is not their desperate posing that causes a sudden violent spike of cold fury in my chest. It is what Chloe is wearing around her neck. The Steadicam violently pushes in, zooming past Marcus's strained smile and locking entirely onto Chloe's throat. Resting against her collarbone, glittering under the blinding glare of the chandeliers, is a massive, incredibly distinct teardrop diamond pendant, suspended on a thick braided platinum chain. I stop walking. The breath catches in my throat not from sadness, but from a rage so pure and concentrated it feels like a physical burn. That necklace is not a Sterling family heirloom. It does not belong to Chloe. It belongs to me. It was the only item of significant value my late mother managed to leave me, an antique custom piece I had cherished above all else. On the freezing, catastrophic night, Marcus finally threw me out of his house with nothing but the clothes on my back. I had desperately tried to pack my small jewelry box. Marcus had physically ripped the box from my hands. He stood there, flanked by his smirking family, claiming that since I was leaving his house, everything I touched, everything I wore, and everything I owned was now legally his property to compensate for the embarrassment I had caused him. He kept my mother's necklace, and now, in a display of absolute sickening disrespect, he has allowed his brother's arrogant, venomous wife to wear my stolen property to a high society gala, just to keep up the appearance of their immense wealth. Chloe throws her head back, laughing loudly at a joke a wealthy investor just made. She reaches up her manicured fingers, brushing against the stolen diamond resting against her skin. She sees me standing in the crowd. Her laughter dies instantly. For a fraction of a second, raw terror flashes across her face, remembering the digital execution order I had initiated against her Buckhead estate. But the blinding lights, the cameras, and the sheer volume of high society peers surrounding her give her a sudden, deeply foolish surge of false courage. She actually believes the public setting protects her. She detaches her arm from Marcus and takes a bold, highly aggressive step toward me, stopping just at the edge of the velvet rope separating the VIP section. Well, 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 Chloe sneers, her voice pitched loud enough for the surrounding guests to hear. She slips effortlessly back into the mocking, highly offensive dialect she uses exclusively to demean me. Look who decided to crash the party. The sassy black woman actually showed up to a black tie event. What is the matter, Nia? The homeless shelter ran out of hot meals tonight. Marcus spins around, his eyes widening in absolute blood-freezing panic when he sees me. He lunges forward, grabbing Chloe's arm in a frantic attempt to pull her back, but she jerks away from him, entirely intoxicated by her own perceived dominance. She touches the diamond pendant again, flaunting it aggressively in my face. We all know why you are really standing here. Chloe continues, her voice dripping with venom. You finally realize that playing the tough independent victim gets you absolutely nowhere. You are broke. You are nothing. So go ahead, drop the act. We know you signed the documents last night. Just wait quietly in the back by the coat check like a good girl. Marcus will have the lawyers draft up a nice little check for you so you can go buy some budget formula for your kid. Just be grateful we are generous enough to toss you a few scraps. She smiles a vicious, triumphant smirk, genuinely believing she has delivered a fatal, humiliating blow in front of Atlanta's elite. The Steadicam pans back to my face. I do not react. I do not shout. I do not try to rip the stolen diamond from her neck. I simply look at her, then look at Marcus, whose face has turned a sickly, translucent shade of gray. He knows exactly what I possess in my clutch. He knows the charity funds Beatrice is currently begging for on stage will never reach his accounts. He knows that every single crystal on his mother's dress, the very ballroom they are renting, and the stolen necklace resting against Chloe's throat legally belongs entirely to me. I slowly raise my hand, the Steadicam tracking the movement, as I extend a single black, silk-gloved finger. I point directly at the diamond pendant on Chloe's neck. Enjoy the sparkle while it lasts, Chloe. I say, my voice a quiet, lethal purr that cuts straight through the ambient noise of the ballroom. Because by midnight I am going to rip everything you think you own straight down to the studs. I do not wait for Chloe to process the absolute certainty of her impending ruin. I turn my back on her gasping, horrified face. In one fluid, practiced motion, I shrug off the heavy black trench coat, letting the dark fabric drop carelessly onto the polished marble floor. Beneath it, I am wearing a custom blood crimson evening gown. The silk drapes across my figure like liquid fire, a stark, violent contrast to the sterile white orchids and melting ice sculptures filling the room. The camera drops low to the floor, adopting a sharp upward angle that frames me against the glittering chandeliers. It is a shot designed to project absolute, unstoppable authority. I am no longer the discarded, humiliated wife. I am the executioner. At that exact moment, the massive gold-plated double doors at the rear entrance of the grand ballroom do not simply open. They are forcefully shoved apart, slamming against the walls with a thunderous boom that echoes over the chatter of 300 wealthy donors. The live string quartet misses a beat, their bows scratching discordantly across their cellos before grinding to a complete dead halt. The sudden silence in the room is deafening, broken only by the rhythmic, authoritative sound of heavy footsteps marching across the floor. I do not look back. I already know exactly who has arrived. Flanking me on my left and right are the two most ruthless, highly compensated corporate litigators in the entire city of Atlanta. Behind them, walking with a grim, uncompromising stride, is the city chief of police, flanked by 4 uniformed officers. The collective gasp from the high society crowd ripples through the ballroom like a shockwave. Billionaires, politicians, and socialites part like the Red Sea, scrambling to get out of the way of the police escort. They stare in absolute shock at the crimson gowns sweeping across the floor, leading a squad of armed officers and men in sharp legal suits directly toward the main stage. On the stage, Beatrice Sterling physically recoils. Her heavily powdered face turns an alarming shade of chalk white. She grips the edges of the ice podium so tightly, her knuckles match the Swarovski crystals on her dress. She looks from me to the chief of police, her carefully constructed reality shattering into a million jagged pieces. Panic, raw and unadulterated, finally breaches her aristocratic facade. Security! Beatrice shrieks, her voice cracking entirely, abandoning her cultured philanthropic tone. She points a trembling manicured finger directly at my face. Guards, remove this woman immediately. She is trespassing. Get her out of my gala right now. Two massive, heavily built private security guards in black suits rush forward from the wings of the stage, moving to intercept my path. They do not make it within 10 feet of me. The chief of police steps forward, raising his hand and casually flashing his gold badge. The sheer, undeniable weight of municipal law enforcement stops the private guards dead in their tracks. They instantly back away, raising their hands in surrender, completely unwilling to obstruct an official police operation. I do not break my stride. I ascend the velvet-lined steps to the main stage. The camera tracks my movement from below, making me appear 10 feet tall as I conquer the platform. Beatrice is trembling violently now. She tries to step in front of the microphone, trying to physically block me from the crowd. I do not slow down. I step directly into her personal space, forcing her to stumble backward in her towering heels. I reach out and snatch the microphone from the stand with a sharp, aggressive twist. I turn to face the sea of shocked, silent faces in the ballroom. 300 of Atlanta's most powerful citizens are staring at me, hanging on my every breath. Good evening, Atlanta. I project my voice booming through the massive speakers, smooth, resonant, and dripping with lethal calm. I apologize for the sudden interruption to this spectacular, incredibly expensive evening, but I felt it was my civic duty to provide an essential update regarding the Sterling Family Foundation. I turn my head, slightly locking eyes with Beatrice, who is practically hyperventilating near the edge of the stage. My dear sweet mother-in-law has just delivered a truly moving, impassioned speech about charity legacy and the sacred obligation to lift up the less fortunate, I say, letting a sharp, mocking smile touch my lips. She begged you to open your checkbooks. She asked you to trust the Sterling name with your hard-earned millions. What she conveniently forgot to mention, however, is that the philanthropic fund she just spent 20 minutes crying over officially filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy at exactly 8 a.m. this morning. A loud collective uproar explodes across the ballroom. Donors gasp, whispering frantically to one another. I see several prominent investors instantly pull out their phones, likely furiously texting their wealth managers to cancel the checks they wrote at the door. "It is a lie!" Beatrice screams into the crowd, her voice raw and hysterical, waving her arms in a desperate attempt to regain control. "She is a disgruntled, unstable ex-wife. She is making it all up. We are the Sterlings." I raise my free hand, signaling to my lead attorney. He steps forward, opening his leather briefcase and pulling out a thick stack of certified, heavily stamped court documents. He holds them up for the crowd to see, then hands a copy directly to the chief of police. "It is not a lie, Beatrice," I say, speaking directly into the microphone, ensuring my voice drowns out her pathetic screeching. "The documents are public record as of 1 hour ago. The Sterling Winter Gala is a completely fraudulent solicitation of capital. The charity does not exist. The bank accounts are entirely empty." I pivot on my heels, my eyes scanning the front row until they lock onto Marcus. He has abandoned Chloe entirely. He is backing away toward the emergency exit, looking around like a trapped animal. 2 police officers have already moved to block the doors, cutting off his only avenue of escape. "And the reason those accounts are empty," I continue, my voice echoing like thunder, "is because my husband, the brilliant, highly respected CEO of Sterling Tech, spent the last 72 hours systematically draining every single remaining penny from the corporate and charitable trusts. He did not use those funds to pay his vendors. He did not use them to save his employees. Marcus Sterling illegally transferred $22 million into an anonymous offshore gambling syndicate located in the Bahamas." The ballroom descends into absolute, unmitigated chaos. The camera circles me, capturing the total destruction of the Sterling Empire playing out in real time. Flashbulbs from the event photographers erupt in a blinding, strobing frenzy, documenting the exact second the Sterling legacy turns to ash. He was trying to cover his brother Jamal's catastrophic multi-million-dollar underground gambling debts. I reveal, projecting the truth to the entire room. He committed massive federal wire fraud and embezzled charity funds to save his own skin. And he thought he could use tonight's donations to quietly replace the missing capital before the federal auditors arrived. I look down at Marcus. He is shaking his head, his hands raised in surrender, his pristine tuxedo suddenly looking like a prison uniform. The chief of police descends the stairs of the stage, pulling a pair of heavy steel handcuffs from his belt. "Marcus Sterling!" The chief's voice cuts through the uproar, loud and authoritative. "You are under arrest for federal wire fraud, embezzlement, and grand larceny." Marcus does not fight. He completely collapses inward, the sheer crushing reality of his total ruin finally breaking his spirit. As the officers yank his arms behind his back and secure the cuffs, I turn my attention back to Beatrice. She is leaning against the melting ice sculpture, her hands covering her face, sobbing uncontrollably as she watches her golden child being read his Miranda rights in front of the entire city. "You said family comes first, Beatrice," I say, my voice cold and devoid of any mercy. "You said we take care of our own, but the truth is you only take care of yourselves. You build your empires on the broken backs of people you consider beneath you. You thought I was weak. You thought I was just a naive, disposable asset you could use and throw away." I drop the microphone onto the floor. It lands with a loud electronic screech that makes everyone in the front row wince. "Enjoy the rest of the gala," I say, stepping down from the podium. "It is the last party you will ever host." I do not walk towards the exit. I descend the velvet-lined stairs of the stage with the measured, predatory grace of a queen surveying a newly conquered territory. The Steadicam drops into a sharp, low-angle perspective, framing me as an unstoppable, towering force against the backdrop of the terrified, whispering gala attendees. The camera begins a rapid series of alternating cuts, flashing between my cold, unyielding expression and the absolute, humiliating collapse of every single member of the Sterling family. I stop directly in front of Marcus. The police officers hold his arms firmly behind his back, the heavy steel cuffs catching the glare of the crystal chandeliers overhead. He is sweating profusely, his chest heaving as he struggles to draw a breath. I do not offer him a single ounce of pity. I reach out, taking a thick black leather folder from the hands of my lead attorney. With a swift, aggressive motion, I slap the folder directly against Marcus's chest, forcing him to pin it against his body with his chin, since his hands are permanently bound. "The sprawling, historic mansion you are currently living in," I say, my voice razor sharp and projecting with lethal clarity, "now legally belongs to Obsidian Holdings. The final foreclosure notice was nailed to your mahogany front doors exactly 45 minutes ago. Your assets are frozen, your bank accounts are seized. You are completely, unequivocally homeless." The camera cuts quickly to Marcus's face. All the color drains from his skin, leaving him looking hollow and entirely broken. His eyes are wide with the soul-crushing realization that he has literally nothing left. He opens his mouth to speak, to beg, or perhaps to offer another hollow manipulation, but no sound comes out. I do not wait for him to find his voice. I pivot sharply on my heels. Chloe is desperately trying to sink into the crowd, attempting to hide behind a group of horrified, whispering socialites who immediately step away from her as if she is highly contagious. I step forward, invading her personal space, forcing her to freeze in her tracks. She looks at me like I am the Grim Reaper coming to collect a debt. "As for you," I command, my tone dropping to a dangerous, icy whisper that commands absolute obedience, "take my mother's necklace off your neck right now." Chloe is shaking so violently she can barely lift her hands to her throat. She fumbles frantically with the heavy platinum clasp, tears of pure terror and profound humiliation streaming down her heavily contoured face, ruining her flawless makeup. The wealthy women surrounding us stare at her in absolute disgust, witnessing a woman caught wearing stolen property. She finally undoes the clasp and drops the diamond pendant into my outstretched palm as if the gem physically burns her skin. I close my fingers tightly around the diamond, feeling the cool weight of my mother's legacy finally back where it belongs. I step even closer, forcing Chloe to look me directly in the eye. Did you honestly think Jamal was immune to this purge? I ask, my voice dripping with absolute unfiltered contempt. The modern architectural masterpiece of a house you and Jamal share, I fully liquidated it at exactly 8 o'clock this morning to cover the remaining massive balance of your husband's underground gambling debts. Your luxury cars have already been repossessed from the valet line outside this very building. You have absolutely nothing to go back to. It looks like you are the one who is going to have to call an Uber X tonight. A loud gasp erupts from the guests standing close enough to hear the final devastating blow. Chloe lets out a pathetic strangled sob, covering her face with her hands as her entire reality shatters into dust. The camera violently pans toward the emergency exit on the far right side of the grand ballroom. Jamal is attempting to sprint through the heavy doors, abandoning his wife and his family to save himself. It is a pathetic, cowardly display that perfectly encapsulates his character. The chief of police barks a single booming command across the room. Two heavily armed plainclothes officers, positioned near the exits, tackle Jamal before his hands even touch the brass push bar. They slam him aggressively against the marble wall, patting him down before wrenching his arms behind his back. The sharp metallic click of a second pair of handcuffs echoes through the silent, captivated ballroom. Jamal kicks and shouts, demanding his lawyers, but the officers ignore his protests entirely. They drag him across the polished dance floor, forcing him to stand right next to his equally humiliated brother. They are going down together for conspiracy, massive corporate fraud, and the illegal transfer of restricted assets. The Steadicam whips back to the main stage. Beatrice Sterling has watched her entire carefully constructed universe disintegrate in the span of 5 agonizing minutes. Her multi-million-dollar charity has been publicly exposed as a massive criminal fraud in front of her elite peers. Both of her golden sons are standing in handcuffs in the center of the room, facing federal prison sentences. Her historic family name is completely destroyed, instantly synonymous with theft, embezzlement, and utter disgrace. The camera zooms in tightly on her face, capturing the exact second her mind simply cannot process the overwhelming, catastrophic reality of her absolute defeat. Her eyes roll back in her head, her knees buckle underneath her. She collapses entirely, her heavy crystal gown pulling her down as she faints, hitting the polished stage floor with a heavy, ungraceful thud. No one rushes forward to help her. The wealthy donors, the politicians, and the socialites she spent her life desperately trying to impress simply stare at her unconscious body, appalled and entirely disgusted by the depths of her deception. The ultimate purge is complete. I turn my back on the pathetic wreckage of the Sterling family. I signal to my legal team and walk straight down the center aisle of the ballroom. The crowd parts for me instantly, offering absolutely no resistance, only terrified respect. I push through the grand double doors, stepping out into the cool, crisp Atlanta night, holding my mother's diamond tightly in my hand, leaving the ashes of their empire behind me forever. The camera begins a slow, deliberate dolly in. The kinetic, chaotic energy of the gala is entirely gone, replaced by a rhythm that is profoundly quiet, sterile, and freezing cold. I am standing in the penthouse office of Obsidian Holdings, looking out through the floor-to-ceiling windows at the sprawling Atlanta skyline. On a massive flat screen mounted to the far wall, the local news networks are running continuous, breathless coverage of the Sterling family's absolute obliteration. The television is muted, but the headlines flash in bold, relentless red banners. Sterling Tech Board liquidated. Brothers denied bail. Historic estate foreclosed. Society elite evicted. In less than 72 hours, the media has meticulously dissected every fraudulent contract, every offshore transfer, and every hollow charity event. The societal excommunication was instantaneous and merciless. The Buckhead Country Club publicly revoked their lifetime memberships by noon the day following the gala. The elite circles that once worshipped Beatrice slammed their doors entirely shut, terrified of being implicated in the federal investigation. Without a single cent to their name, and with their assets strictly frozen by government prosecutors, the remaining Sterling family members were forcefully evicted from their temporary hotel accommodations. They were dumped into a decaying, crime-ridden apartment complex on the absolute lowest end of the South Side, entirely abandoned by the world they once ruled. My private encrypted phone buzzes on the glass desk. The caller ID displays an unregistered prepaid number. I know exactly who is on the other end. I pick up the device, swipe the screen, and press it to my ear without saying a single word. Nia, a voice croaks through the speaker. It is a pathetic hollow rasp completely stripped of its former aristocratic arrogance. Beatrice is weeping her breath, hitching in desperate, ragged gasps. Please, please, Nia, do not hang up. You have to help me. The heating in this building does not work. There is black mold on the walls. The police will not let me speak to Marcus. Chloe took whatever cash we had left and ran. I have absolutely nothing. I remain perfectly still, watching the morning traffic flow through the city below. I let her choke on her own desperation for a long, agonizing moment. We are family, Beatrice sobs, attempting to play her final, most manipulative card in a pathetic bid for mercy. No matter what happened, we are bound by blood. I am a grandmother. Please, Nia. I just want to see the twins. I just want to hold my grandchildren. You cannot keep them away from their family. They need us. Have mercy on us for their sake. The slow dolly in continues, bringing the camera tight onto my face. The temperature in the room feels like it drops 10 degrees. My expression is carved from solid stone. There is no triumph in my eyes, no gloating, only absolute chilling finality. You do not get to use that word, I say, my voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm deadpan register. You do not get to invoke the title of grandmother. Do you remember the night you let Marcus drag me out the front door? Do you remember standing in the foyer, sipping your bourbon while I begged you for just one more week to recover from a high-risk delivery? My babies were exactly 10 days old, Beatrice. 10 days. They were fragile, they were vulnerable, and it was below freezing outside. Beatrice lets out a loud whimper, a weak, pathetic attempt to interrupt and offer a manufactured apology, but my voice easily overpowers hers, cutting through the line like a razor. You watched your son throw a postpartum woman and 2 premature infants into the snow. You locked the iron gates behind us, and you went to sleep in your heated mansion. You did not care if we froze to death. You did not care if we starved. You wrote us off as acceptable collateral damage so you could maintain your pristine public image. I grip the phone tighter, my posture rigid as I deliver the absolute irrevocable truth. Your bloodline ends with Marcus and Jamal in a federal penitentiary. Those 2 children you suddenly care so deeply about do not carry the Sterling name. They never will. They are Washingtons. They belong to me. They belong to my legacy. And they will never know the toxic, pathetic failure of the family you built. You are going to rot in that South Side slum, Beatrice, and you are going to do it completely alone. Do not ever call this number again. I pull the phone away from my ear and press the end button, instantly severing the connection and terminating her hysterical, begging voice. I turn the device over in my hand and drop it directly into the wastebasket beside my desk. I turn back to the window, the camera finally coming to a halt on a close-up of my face, illuminated by the bright, unyielding morning sun. The Sterling Empire is officially ashes. The past is dead. The revenge is beautifully, flawlessly complete. The camera slowly pulls back from the tight frame of my face, transitioning seamlessly into a sweeping over-the-shoulder shot. We look past the sharp, structured shoulder of my tailored suit jacket, gazing down through the pristine floor-to-ceiling glass. Below me, the sprawling, bustling arteries of downtown Atlanta pulse with morning traffic. The city moves forward, completely oblivious to the titans that fell the night before. I take a slow, deep breath. The air in the penthouse is sterile, quiet, and completely mine. My thoughts briefly drift away from Beatrice and settle on the collateral damage. Not Marcus, not Jamal, but Chloe. The woman who proudly wore my mother's teardrop diamond like a hunting trophy. The woman who spent years actively weaponizing her unearned wealth to make me feel small. Her specific downfall, required a highly precise surgical kind of legal devastation. The moment the federal agents shoved Jamal into the back of an unmarked squad car outside the grand ballroom, Chloe's ruthless survival instincts kicked into overdrive. She did not visit her husband in a holding cell. She did not attempt to hire him a defense attorney. Less than 48 hours after the Winter Gala, she marched directly into the most expensive aggressive family law office in Buckhead. She filed for an expedited, heavily publicized divorce, citing irreconcilable differences, criminal endangerment, and profound emotional distress. She sat in a plush leather chair, sipping sparkling water, fully expecting to walk away with a massive multi-million-dollar alimony settlement. She demanded the sprawling estate, the luxury vehicles, and half of their shared investment portfolios. She believed she could simply sever ties with a sinking ship and float away on a golden lifeboat. The camera flashes to a stark, brightly lit deposition room a few weeks later. Chloe sits across from her high-powered attorney, an expensive alligator skin handbag resting on her lap. The lawyer slides a thin, incredibly bleak manila folder across the polished conference table. I can practically see the exact agonizing microsecond her arrogant delusion shatters into absolute dust. The attorney explains the situation in brutal, uncompromising billing hour detail. He informs her that family court cannot divide zero. There is no hidden estate. There are no untouchable trust funds. Obsidian Holdings executed a flawless ironclad seizure of the deed to the house. The luxury vehicles she demanded were leased through a corporate shell company that I now own and immediately liquidated for scrap value. Jamal's personal and business bank accounts are deeply in the negative, permanently frozen, and seized by federal investigators. Chloe is not walking away with a lucrative settlement. She is walking away with absolutely nothing but half of Jamal's unsecured astronomical personal debt. She had signed joint tax returns. She had co-signed illicit loans to fund her designer lifestyle. My legal trap ensured she was held equally liable for the financial crater her husband dug. When the absolute reality of her bankruptcy hit the tabloids, her so-called elite friends vanished. The women she gossiped with, the socialites she hosted at her lavish Sunday brunches, blocked her phone number instantly. She became a toxic liability, an infectious disease that high society aggressively quarantined. The Steadicam executes a harsh, violently jarring cut. We instantly trade the silent, pristine luxury of my corporate penthouse for the buzzing, flickering fluorescent lighting of a dilapidated gas station on the absolute outer edge of the city limits. The atmosphere is visually abrasive. The air smells heavily of stale burnt coffee, cheap menthol cigarettes, and harsh chemical cleaners. Standing behind the scratched, bulletproof plexiglass counter is Chloe. The visual transformation is absolutely staggering. She is wearing a stiff, incredibly unflattering, oversized neon green polyester polo shirt with a generic corporate logo stitched haphazardly over the breast pocket. Her hair, once perfectly blown out and maintained by elite stylists every 3 days, is pulled back into a messy, defeated knot, the expensive blonde highlights already growing out to reveal dark, neglected roots. Her signature acrylic manicures are completely gone, replaced by chipped, raw, unpolished fingertips. She is staring blankly at the glowing digital display of the cash register. Her eyes are hollow, completely void of their former vicious spark, with heavy dark circles etched permanently beneath them. A burly, exhausted truck driver steps up to the counter. He slams a muddy energy drink and a crumpled, greasy $20 bill onto the counter. The loud noise makes Chloe visibly flinch. She picks up the damp can, her hands trembling slightly, and scans the barcode with a scanner gun. The machine emits a loud, piercing beep. She opens the cash drawer and struggles to count the change. Her mind, once solely occupied with country club seating charts and designer handbag waitlists, is now entirely broken by the sheer, unyielding reality of minimum wage survival. She hands the coins back to the trucker, muttering a robotic, lifeless, mandated corporate greeting. The customer ignores her completely. He grabs his drink and walks out the door, not even offering her a glance. He treats her exactly how she used to treat the service workers, the staff, and me. She is entirely invisible, completely disposable, and fundamentally beneath notice. A harsh, booming voice crackles from the back office. It is the shift manager yelling at Chloe to grab a mop and clean up a spill near the diesel pumps. She closes her eyes, a single pathetic tear escaping and tracing a line through the cheap foundation she applied hours ago. She looks down at the cheap, sticky linoleum floor. She leans her weight heavily against the counter, letting out a ragged, exhausted breath. By pure agonizing muscle memory, she reaches her right hand up to her collarbone. Her fingers brush against her bare, sweaty skin, a phantom reflex desperately searching for the cold, heavy weight of a teardrop diamond that no longer exists. She has traded high society charity galas and courtside seats for the graveyard shift at a convenience store. The ultimate supreme snob, the woman who openly mocked my financial struggles and told me to wait by the coat check, has been brutally reduced to scrubbing gasoline stains and counting dirty pennies just to afford her weekly rent in a cramped, windowless studio apartment next to a highway overpass. It is not merely a descent into poverty. It is the complete, absolute, and total annihilation of her ego. Every single hour she spends standing behind that cheap register is a living, breathing testament to the severe consequences of crossing me. The camera cuts back to the over-the-shoulder shot in the penthouse. I remain standing by the window, the Atlanta skyline stretching out endlessly before me. I do not feel a shred of guilt. I do not feel remorse. The air up here is clean, the silence is absolute, and the view is undeniably spectacular. I step away from the panoramic glass, leaving the ruined city and the ashes of my enemies behind me. The Steadicam begins a slow, deliberate dolly out. It captures the sheer expanse of my domain, gliding backward with a quiet, rhythmic grace. I walk across the dark hardwood floor, pushing open a set of frosted glass double doors that lead into the private, sun-drenched suite adjacent to my office. This is not a boardroom. This is a sanctuary. The air in here is warm, carrying the faint, sweet scent of lavender and baby lotion. In the center of the room, bathed in natural light, rests a magnificent custom-built crib. I approach it, the hard edges of my corporate armor instantly melting away. My twins are awake. They are kicking their legs, tangling themselves in ultra-soft cashmere blankets. When they see me, their faces light up. They let out a chorus of joyful, innocent laughter, reaching their tiny hands up toward me. I lean over the railing, a profound, overwhelming wave of love washing over me. I let my fingers brush against their warm, soft cheeks. They thought they had destroyed us. That was the Sterling family's greatest, most fatal miscalculation. They truly believed that by stripping away my home, seizing my assets, and discarding me into the freezing winter night, they would break my spirit. They thought that casting a vulnerable postpartum mother and two premature infants into the snow would guarantee our quiet, pathetic demise. They expected me to fade away to become another tragic, forgotten footnote in their long history of collateral damage. But they did not understand the fundamental truth of resilience. They did not know that when you violently throw a seed into black, suffocating mud and bury it beneath layers of freezing snow, it does not die. It does not surrender to the cold, and it does not beg the winter for mercy. It uses the darkness. It takes the pain, the isolation, and the freezing pressure, and it uses them to root deeper. It anchors itself firmly in the bedrock, gathering quiet, unstoppable strength. It hardens its shell, fighting through the dirt, until it eventually erupts from the soil, growing into a towering ancient tree that no storm can ever uproot. That is exactly what I did. I took their cruelty and turned it into my foundation. I took their arrogance and weaponized it into my blueprint for success. I reached down, lifting my son into my arms, resting his small head against my shoulder while my daughter continues to coo happily in her crib. I look back out toward the skyline. The Sterling family confused inherited privilege with actual power. They built their entire identity on the oppression of others, convinced that their bloodline made them untouchable deities. But power is not given. Power is forged in the fire of survival. People fundamentally misunderstand the concept of vengeance. They assume it requires chaotic anger, screaming matches, or lowering yourself into the gutter to fight your enemies in the mud. But true ultimate payback operates on an entirely different frequency. It is perfectly silent. The sweetest, most absolute revenge is not actively tearing someone down. It is standing at the absolute untouchable peak of a mountain you climbed with your own two hands. It is looking down from the summit and simply watching the people who maliciously trampled you systematically destroy their own lives. I did not force Marcus to embezzle millions of dollars from a fraudulent charity. I did not force Jamal to gamble away his wife's assets in underground syndicates. I did not force Beatrice to build her social empire on a foundation of rotting lies, or Chloe to tether her entire self-worth to stolen jewelry. I simply held up a mirror to their corruption. I removed the safety nets their wealth had falsely provided, pulled the curtain back, and let their own insatiable greed completely consume them. They dug their own graves. I merely provided the shovels and invited the world to watch the burial. The twins belong to me. They carry the Washington name, a name that will now be synonymous with resilience, power, and unyielding integrity. They will never know the toxic, pathetic failure of the people who tried to throw them away. They will grow up in a world where they are safe, cherished, and entirely protected by an empire built on their mother's unbreakable will. The Steadicam continues its slow, steady retreat, widening the frame to capture the entire room. It frames the warmth of the nursery, the gentle lighting, and the profound peace of this moment, starkly contrasting the cold, conquered city skyline looming behind the glass. I pull my son closer, rocking him gently as a genuine, deeply fulfilled smile touches my lips. It is not a smirk of malice. It is not a grimace of residual anger. It is the quiet, unshakable peace of a woman who has fought the ultimate war and claimed total victory. I have survived the winter. I have reclaimed my life, and I have won. The frame lingers on my smile, the joyful sounds of my children echoing softly in the pristine room before the screen slowly, seamlessly fades to pitch black.